Hello, everybody, and welcome into my latest live broadcast. Today is Tuesday, August the 13th, 2019. My name is Carey Holzman. I am not John Lovitz. Please stop saying that. Hello to all my friends in blue joining us a little early. I just wanted to start just a few minutes early to make sure audio and video are going to be in sync. Hopefully we won't have any issues with YouTube today. Al Cooey says, I just donated $25 at TechVets. Use it wisely. Well, thank you, Al. I appreciate that very much. Hello to Paul Newman, Shane D, Renee Cusson, Patrick Rousseau, Luke Greenia, Carl Wilson, Ray Sudbury, Vern Mahoney, Jesse Kirk, Darren Gilholm, Alhaj Depej, Dave Murray, Joseph Neal, Jay Toy, Thomas McKelvey. Mario Els contributed $5. I hope I can get done with this machine today and I can start Marty's build tomorrow. I hope. Philip Musto, Kevin Sears, Mark Baggett, Paul Newman, Tony Wallow, G Win Past Me, Eddie Casanova, William Dawson. Welcome in, everybody. Welcome in. Good to see everybody. Donnie Seeger's in there. Contributed $2 to the channel. Thank you, Donnie. Troll McTrollington. And Artec joining us from Sweden. Welcome in, everybody. Those are just some of my friends here in blue. Hopefully I'll change all of everybody who comes in here to blue. That's my goal. Peter Dunstall, thank you for confirming audio and video looks good. Dustin Fuller, Hoop. Peter Brooks, hello. All right. Wanted to get, like I said, a little earlier start, get you up to date with some things. Today is the second Tuesday of the month. This is when Microsoft releases patches to Windows. The day every server admin at big corporations want to call in sick. I think there are 96 patches in a cumulative update released today. You can force that update now by clicking your start button or the little Windows icon down there in the lower left corner of Windows 10. Click the little gear icon and then you can check for updates there. Or it'll just happen automatically on its own. All the machines I have been updated, no problems, as normal. And in fact, there was a new BIOS update released for the X470 Pro that I'm running the streaming machine on. And we'll see if that makes any difference. It already seems quieter, but you know, we're just getting started. Orly Doss has contributed $5 and says enjoying the content. Thank you, Orly. And John Peck has contributed £2. Thank you to John. Fred Adams says hello. Welcome in, Fred. So yeah, so this is Patch Tuesday. Be sure you get those latest updates as soon as possible. The internet is rampant with viruses, ransomware, Trojans, all kinds of nastiness. And so these updates are absolutely critical. A lot of people are under the misunderstanding that you just need to not click on attachments or links in emails. While that is true, that is a way for viruses and nastiness to get on your system. It is not the only way. Sometimes just having an unpatched system connected to the internet is all it takes. The idea that, well, if I leave the system, you know, if I'm only on the system 5 minutes, or if I turn the system off at night, no. When these viruses occur, when these exploits take over, it happens in milliseconds, much faster than a human being can even respond. It's not a question of if the computer's offline more, that it's less likely. No, it's simply not true. If the computer is patched constantly, without delay, then it's more statistically unlikely, combined with you having safe surfing habits, such as not clicking on links in emails and attachments, etc., which we already know. But we need to extend that to understand that it can be a Windows itself or a program within Windows. Programs like Flash and Java are going away because of the huge security exploit they continually have. They patch them. Patches never end. And more exploits after the latest patch. It just given up. It's just completely unsafe. Flash and Java are completely unsafe. And if you have to use them, always make sure you're patching them and the patches come out regularly because there's always more exploits. Same is true with Adobe products, Adobe Acrobat. I'm not saying as much of that as we used to, but Microsoft Office, any applications that you have, Chrome, Firefox, you always want to get those updates. Chrome is pretty good on doing it on its own. For most programs, you just go to the Help button or the Help text at the top of the page of the program, top of the window. And then usually About or Check for Updates is an option within Help universally across most software platforms. Most software programs on the Windows platform typically update that way. You cannot rely on automation. Automation needs to be supervised, audited, confirmed. Or when you become a victim, whose fault is it? So I just provide the information, you guys do with it what you will, and that's how we're getting started off today with Patch Tuesday. It is Patch Tuesday. And I got a weird icon down below in my system tray I've never seen before. What is this? Oh, it gives me a little icon of a microphone down in the bottom right corner now since this Windows update went in. It says OBS is using your microphone. That's a nice touch. You know, if you get a piece of software, and I think that's what this is, I'm guessing. If you get a piece of software that is spying on you, whether it's turning on a webcam or a microphone or both, it sure would be nice to have a notification down in the system tray that the webcam or microphone are in use when you may not have activated them. So maybe that's an update to Windows, or is that a part of OBS? I don't know. I just noticed it just now. Caught my attention. Carey, would you recommend an EVGA GTX 1660 for budget gamers? You can. I mean, it depends on the games you play, what kind of performance you're expecting, what your budget is, and what you're comparing it to. It's really not a decision I can make for you. I can't tell you how to spend your money. I don't know you, and I don't know what you find to be acceptable in gaming performance or resolutions or the number of screens or, you know, blah, blah, blah. So in general, do I recommend the 1660? Yes. There's an AMD which performs, I think, similarly for a little less money. Is it the 570? Which one is it? Hold on. Now you got me thinking. That's never a good thing. It's the, what is it? The Radeon RX 5700 XT. I'm sorry, the RX 5700, not the XT. It looks to outperform the RTX 2060 for exactly the same price. So the gains are only 5 to 15% faster with various games and graphical settings, but it's an improvement that costs not $1 more than an RTX 2060. Well, that's obviously, you know, something to consider. I generally don't use the AMD cards because I've had driver issues in the past, and I just kind of feel burned by them. But you know, decide for yourself. Obviously, they're still in business, so it must not be too bad. It's 1:30? Oh yeah. All right, we're past the start time now. I think asking in the chat room is a good idea because when you ask me, you're getting one opinion from somebody who doesn't know you. And an opinion from somebody who doesn't know you is worthless. But if you get a bunch of opinions from people who don't know you, that should really set it in your head how important it is for you to make the choice on your own. That opinions can vary across the board on how different people prioritize different things, how people value one thing that somebody else doesn't value. And so without knowing you and your values or what you value, it would be impossible to make a recommendation. Well, not impossible, but the odds are stacked against the person you're asking to provide you the answer that's going to be the best answer for you unless they know you or they get to know you. And so for that reason, do your research online and make the decision that's right for you. Look through reviews, look through end user reviews from the websites, the retailers that sell the products. See what people are saying. Compare prices, warranties, performance in the games that you play, cost, and make the decision that's right for you. It's no different than asking me what car you should buy. Should it be a sports car or a pickup truck or a minivan or an SUV, or maybe you want an electric vehicle or perhaps an all-wheel drive vehicle. Maybe you need to tow something, or you just want a sports car with a lot of power. Maybe you want a hybrid, or perhaps you want a two-door car versus a four-door car. Maybe you need an off-road vehicle. I don't know you. I don't know what your budget is. I don't know what your priorities are, and there's all different kinds of cars to choose from. I've only just barely scratched the surface. So the best advice, the best opinion is the one you don't want to hear, which is do the research for yourself. It's your money, it's your investment. Take responsibility for it. Don't put that off on anybody else, because ultimately the only person who's going to be affected negatively by that decision, no matter how it's made, is you. Adam Jet says, Carey, I've got an AM3 Plus motherboard here I'm not using. Can I send it to you? I don't have any need for an AM3 Plus board. They're obsolete at this point. I appreciate the offer, but I don't have a CPU that will fit, nor, well, I probably have RAM laying around that'll work, but I honestly don't know what I would do with it. I appreciate that, though. I appreciate your thoughtfulness. So hopefully we're having a better time here with the stream. I'm sort of stalling a little bit, if you can't tell, just to make sure everything is steady and happy, which we're looking good so far. Now, yesterday on this system, I was replacing the power supply, and I was going to do all the cable management yesterday, and then I stopped and I said, you know what? Before I do that, I want to do a demonstration, a live demonstration about a question I'm asked quite often, which is, how often should you change the thermal compound on your CPU? At what point does it make sense to take the system apart, clean it up, and reapply fresh thermal compound? And it's a very difficult question to answer because there's a lot of variables there as well. The environment the computer's kept in, the thermal compound that was used, and how it was applied. That's going to be a big factor. Some companies that are using, that are mass producing computers aren't necessarily going for the highest, the most efficient thermal compound, but rather the one that's the cheapest that'll get the job done. So I already hear somebody out there saying, well, are you saying when you buy a brand new computer from a big manufacturer like Alienware or Dell, the thermal compound's not good? Yeah, I'm saying it could be better. They're manufacturing not to make the best product, but to make the best product for that profit margin or the price they're charging you, the way they see it. So the less they put into parts, the more profit they put in their pocket. If you buy a computer and there are 3 computers and they're all priced pretty close together and they're all spec'd pretty close together, how do you choose which one to buy? Can you choose the one that has the better thermal compound? How would you? Unless you were given an opportunity to put a torture test on each machine and see how it actually performs, which no store is going to allow you to do. You're rolling the dice. If you build it yourself, no dice to be rolled. So let's say you build it yourself, you use a real nice high-end thermal compound, then how often should you change it? Well, again, it still has to depend on the environment that it's in. In Arizona, we have a pretty dusty environment, and it's very hot and dry. There's no humidity, very little humidity. So thermal compound is more likely going to dry out a bit sooner in that kind of environment than in another environment. Elevation can have an effect on the thermal compound as well. So this machine behind me, this is an Alienware Aurora R6, which I believe has the original thermal compound on it, and this machine is several years old. So what I want to do is I want to run Prime 95 on it for 15 minutes. We're going to measure how hot it gets. Then we're going to take it apart. We'll take the heatsink off. We'll clean up the thermal compound, reapply it, put it back together, and run the same test again and see if it makes any difference whatsoever and if it's worth doing. How's that for a test? So let me start plugging things back in. I'm going to leave, I think I'm going to leave this open. It doesn't really matter if the test results are different with it closed, because it's not about how cool is it going to run when it's all put together. It's really just a comparison of how hot is it going to run now and how hot is it going to run after the thermal compound, regardless of the configuration. We're going to leave the configuration open so I can get in and out of there easily. Because I haven't managed these cables yet, it's kind of interfering with my ability to close this because that big cable is in the way, and while I could fuss with it, it's only going to slow this process down. And whatever temperature it's going to run at, all closed up, should still be the same temperature difference when it's open. All I'm trying to do is see if the thermal compound makes any difference in the temperature, regardless if the case is open or closed. So it should be the same. If there's no difference, then there should be no difference when it's closed. The temperature might be slightly higher when the case is closed. It's possible. But what I'm saying is if the temperature is higher with the case closed, then it should still be equally cooler or the same after the thermal compound is replaced and we put the system back in the same configuration. The efficacy of the thermal compound doesn't change because the system is open or closed. I think that's a really wordy way of what I'm trying to get out. All right, so the power supply is in the off position. Let me just plug that in, and we'll get this plugged in over here. And I want to move this because when I move the system, I don't want the cable knocking over my drink. And we are currently in August in Phoenix. Is a very humid time to be here. This is the worst possible time to visit. Just so you know, it's very uncomfortable here. So we do have higher humidity than the other 11 months out of the year. However, it's still hot. In fact, it's worse because not only do we have temperatures over 110 degrees Fahrenheit, but we've got humidity ranging, instead of 5 or 10%, it's up around 40 to 60%. It's pretty humid. So it's miserable. That's what I'm trying to tell you. It's absolutely miserable. But I was going somewhere with that. Let's see what happens. Let's fire this up and get Prime 95 on here and start running that test. That's what we need to do right now. Hello, computer. There it goes. Whoops, let's put camera 2 on. Hopefully that'll work. Lourdes Evans contributed $2 and says hello. Hello, Lourdes, welcome in. Revertive Cloud has contributed $5. It says, hey, Carey, fellow tech here. I want to say thank you for all you do and showing the world it's not all the glory it's made out to be. Keep it up. Well, thank you. Yeah, you know what? It can be all the glory. It's possible. I have to put power back on the video card because I was getting ready to do the cable management and I took it off yesterday and forgot that I took it off. I'm going to shut the power supply off before I do it, just because it's a good way to hose your video card. If I can see what I'm doing here, that would be helpful. So I'm just going to standard PCI power cable. It's the only one that looks like it does. It's the only one that can plug into your graphics card, so you don't have to worry about getting it wrong. It only goes in one direction. And I just can't see. That's my problem. All right, where's my flashlight? Usually not that difficult. You know what I think the problem is? I'm working on a weird angle. I'm going to find an excuse. Don't worry. Okay, I'm going to try this again. There it is. I don't think I've ever struggled that much to put a power cable onto a video card before. You can say you were here to see that. Okay, let me fire it up again. Turn the switch back on. Power. And let's see what it does. I guess I gotta stand over here. I know. I just keep doing stupid things. Okay, hold on a minute. I am rushing because I want to get more done today than I have gotten done in the last couple days. And as a result, I'm making really dumb mistakes like not plugging all the power connectors in. So let me plug CPU power back in. Once again, I was getting the power supply ready for cable management, and I had unplugged everything. Well, not everything. I unplugged the CPU power and I unplugged the video card power, and so I have to plug those back in now if I expect the system to work reasonably. Makes sense that you need to have power to things for them to work right. So we're going to try this one more time. All right. Power supply back on. Should boot up now. Apologize. Just checking to see if you were paying attention. Yeah, that's the ticket. All right, here we go. I'm going to need my flash drive that has the Prime 95 program on it. We'll get that ready. And I'm going to need my timer so we can run this test for 15 minutes, and we'll do that both before and after. And what error do we have here? CPU fan failure. Am I blocking the fan? It appears I might be. Got power supply cable was in the way. So that was why I was doing the cable management. You can see how I just walked myself into a circle there, right? All right, should boot up this time. And while we're waiting, all right, we're getting there. We're getting there, folks. Flash drive, plug that in back here. And I want Prime 95, which should be in here somewhere. PC testing software, Prime 95, 26.6. Yes, please. Close this. Oh, I need to monitor the temps too. So I need the temp monitoring application, which is HW monitor. Okay, let's get the hardware monitor running first so we can see what our temps are now. Let's close all these other distractions here. And let's open Prime 95, and then let's just hide this desktop. Go to View and Show Desktop Icons. We'll turn that off because it's just too darn distracting. Here's our clock speeds and everything up right here, and there's our temperatures here. We're seeing a max temperature of 55 degrees centigrade, just under normal operating conditions. Now I'm going to start Prime 95. Here we go. And start the timer right here. And we're going to let that run for 15 full minutes, keeping an eye on the temps while we're doing it. Now, one of the advantages of running this test, apart from putting to bed this overemphasizing of thermal compound, in my opinion, we can spend the time waiting to talk to each other. So if you have any questions, technical questions about computers, the operating system, I'm here to help. I'll try and point you in the right direction. And of course, the chat room is also filled with experts as well that will offer you answers if I don't happen to get to your question. And sometimes you might have to repeat your question a couple times, only because we've got about 630 people watching right now, and so if there's a lot of activity in the chat, it can fly by before I get a chance to see it. What is your opinion on Microsoft ending Windows 7 support? I think it's about time. Looking forward to it. Windows 7 has been around very, very long, especially when you consider how much new tech has come out since Windows 7 was released to the public. Remember, Windows 7 was coded for probably 2 or 3 years at least before it was released to the public. So no matter how old you think it is, it's older than that. Then on top of that, we've got technologies like solid-state drives, protocols like non-volatile memory express, lots of new technologies, USB 3, I mean, I can go on and on and on, that have come out since Windows 7 was released. And there's only so much an engineer can do to patch it and keep it compatible with the latest and greatest hardware. And even then, it doesn't run optimally. Like, the hardware is not really being pushed to its limit because the operating system creators did not have a crystal ball to design the operating system to optimally take advantage of this new hardware that's come out since then. Then there's also security concerns. Well, with the number of patches Windows 7 has already had, which is countless, practically, it leaves the operating system very vulnerable with regards to security on the internet. Because whether you choose to evolve or not, the internet that you're connecting to is. And so if you lag behind, then you put yourself, your identity, your money, all at risk. It's certainly not a gamble, I think, worth taking. If you think the cost of upgrading is expensive, you should see the cost of not doing it. And let's take a look at how we're doing. Let me go full screen on this so I can see what it's doing. It's too small. Full screen. So right now we're seeing a max temp of 72 degrees centigrade. We've been running now for just about 4 minutes. We have 11 minutes to go in the test. These temps are very impressive. There's no reason so far that I can see to want to change the thermal compound on the CPU, because once you're operating within the temperature range recommended by the manufacturer, which is anywhere, up to 100 degrees centigrade, there's nothing to fix. The CPU is not running any better. Some people might say, well, the CPU will last longer. People don't keep CPUs long enough for last longer to really even be a consideration anymore. If the CPU will last 70 or 80 years, and by it running hot, it lasts only 50 years, that's probably still 40 more years than it'll ever be used. And certainly more than half of its usable life will probably be in a dumpster or a recycling yard. So same is true with solid state drives. In my opinion, people are so fixated that, oh, well, solid state drives have a limited number of writes. It's far more than you really understand. If you're worried about it, then you really don't have a good understanding of it. Chances are solid state drives do have a finite life, but you could spend your entire lifetime with a single solid state drive trying to get it to die from being written to too many times. Now, that's not to say you couldn't create a program to cause it. Of course, you can create an unrealistic scenario to emulate an impossible use case where data is being written in petabytes as quickly as possible until the drive is dead. However, under real world usage, you could spend your whole lifetime with a modern solid state drive and never wear out the write cycles on it under normal usage. And that includes gaming, and that includes photo editing, and that includes video editing. You would have to be extraordinarily extreme, like a Google server that's just on 24/7 being hammered by tens of thousands of users at the same time. That would kill it, within a couple of years. But in a regular user case scenario, there's other reasons the drive can fail that are more likely than just running out of write cycles. Your controller can fail. Stuff like that happens. So obviously there's no perfect data storage device. You just make backups regardless. You just get the real performance boost with a solid state drive. Anybody running a mechanical hard drive today as their boot drive has no idea what they're missing when you go to solid state. And if your excuse for not going to a solid state drive is that it's too expensive, they're not anymore. If your excuse is you're worried that they're less reliable, they're about 5 times more reliable than a hard disk drive. About 5 times. A hard disk drive is about 20% as reliable as a solid state drive. In the testing that I've done and in my experience, I see tons and tons and tons of bad hard drives. It's just a normal part of the job. Never seen a failed solid state drive from any customer. I've seen them from people emailing me, I've seen them from people I don't know, buying a brand of drive I don't recommend, and who knows, you know, what source they got it from. And that's not to say that that's always going to be the case. There's bound to be a bad solid-state drive in my future at some point, but since I started installing them in 2013, that has not occurred yet. What has occurred is I have replaced the solid-state drives because faster, larger ones became available for less money, but not because the drives failed. Let's see if I can move myself maybe in the corner. What if I do that? And I don't really need to see prime 95, do I? I want to see the temps. There we go. We're about 8.5 minutes into this test. Ian Costello has contributed £2. Thank you to Ian for your support and contributing to the community and the channel. Christoph Esch has contributed €5. He says, I can smell cookies for the dogs. Hello from Germany. Thank you, Christoph. I gave the dogs cookies before we got started. And Lyle is getting big, so I'm going to watch the cookies with Lyle there. And hello to Johnny Matney, welcome in. Tina McLaughlin, Marlena Dvorak, Steve Larkin, Peter Rayner, Jim G, Carl Wilson, welcome in, guys. Saying hello to all my friends in blue. Rich Robbins is back for more. Welcome back, Rich. Pete Unwin, John Feinor. And we'll say hello to Sid1701D9, Steve Perry, Classic Computers, Azaraf, Thaluka, Bobamu, Tim Francis, Christopher F, Jeff Mitchell, Paige Davis, Sammy Ordning, LW, welcome in, everybody. Just running a performance test on the current thermal compound, the stock thermal compound that came with this Alienware Aurora R6. Running Prime 95 for 15 minutes, and we're going to see what our maximum temp is, then change the thermal compound and see if we make it worse, better, or no difference. Place your bets. Oops, wrong button, Carey. I need to see my screen full screen, and I'm getting the wrong one every time. All right, let's go to this one. Full screen. Maximum temp so far is 75 degrees centigrade. This chip can get up to 100 degrees. It's an i7 7700. This is the chip we're working with. John Williams says, hello, Carey. I just spent a month on the road, 4,800 miles. It was a fun time. Nice, I'm jealous. Love a big road trip. Nothing like a big road trip. Corey says, you've been teaching me all day. You just didn't know it. I've been on a Carey binge today. Right on. Appreciate that. Leslie says, just wanted to say thanks for the case badge you gave me. Right on, Leslie. Glad you like it. Had one of those days Sunday, I put a Mugen 5 on backwards overhanging the RAM and then put the back fan on a push-pull facing the wrong way. All good. Well, that's how we learn. It's not a big deal. It didn't cause any harm. Maybe you embarrassed yourself a little bit, but most people wouldn't even admit it because their pride gets in the way. And that gives others a false sense of failure when they do it incorrectly. Doing something incorrectly is not a big deal. It's recognizing it and correcting it and then sharing your story with others so that they know, hey, it's possible to put it on backwards. It's possible to put the fan on the other way. And at the end of the day, didn't really cause any harm. Took a little bit more time to get the job done. But so what? It's fun. There are worse things I could spend my time doing. Paul Newman says he's looking forward to the 9900K build tomorrow, hopefully. Yeah, me too. I can't wait to get started on it. Where are we at? 13 and a half minutes, minute and a half to go. System got kind of loud behind me there, and then it quieted back down. Wes Cordell thinks that there'll be 1 degree of difference between this thermal compound and the new application of thermal compound when we rerun the same test. We'll see. This is all live. You know nothing's being edited and polished and manipulated here. I have no idea what's going to happen. If you ask me what do I think is going to happen, I think the thermal compound I use is a slightly better quality. I think I will apply it in a much more efficient and optimal way for the thermal paste to work better. And I think it'll make a difference of at least 3 degrees centigrade. Ooh, that's all the difference in the world, isn't it? But I could be wrong. And when I say 3 degrees, I mean to my benefit. I think it'll be 3 degrees cooler on the max temp after 15 minutes. That's my prediction, and I could be completely wrong. And I'm not basing it on the current temps. I'm just basing it on knowing the type of thermal compound and how they apply it in these big factories versus the way I apply it and the type I use. And that is all I'm basing my theory on. So I've actually gone a little over now. We're at 15 minutes and 30 seconds. Ooh, it's really ramped up now. Listen to that. Maybe we'll go 16 minutes on this test now because it's getting interesting. We're looking at a max temp of 85 degrees centigrade. Now, those of you who know me know that 85 is the max where I start getting concerned. Like, you know, I'd like to be under 85. I'll take 85 if I have to, but if I can improve it, I will. So right there, we just hit 16 minutes on the test. So I'm going to stop the test. Got to use the right mouse. Stop. And watch how fast the CPU cools down. It went from 76 all the way down to still dropping 59, 56, 49. The benefit of an air cooler is you'll see those temps drop quick. One of the downsides of a liquid cooler is liquid takes a lot longer to cool down. So your system stays hotter longer after it's done. Not that that's, again, going to make any real difference in the real world, but it just bothers me that nobody talks about it. Full disclosure, that's all I'm saying. All right, let's go ahead and shut this down so we can work on it. Let's do this. Start. Shut down. Oh, look, we got an update waiting. Let's update. Let's leave it alone because I don't want... Oh, it's not really giving me any option. Huh. Well, I'll just do update and shut down. It's fine. I really didn't want any difference in the operating system to make this test 100%. But it'd be fine. I can't imagine. I mean, it's possible something on the Windows updates could have an effect on our temps. Seems unlikely. It is Patch Tuesday. I said it right when I started the show. I shouldn't be surprised it wanted to update. I forgot it's got a Wi-Fi connection on it. It connected through my guest network and downloaded the update in the background. So that's what happened right there. Now, they're asking, am I adjusting for any ambient temp changes? No, absolutely not. Because the test is going to happen so quickly, the room temperature, what you have to understand is the room temperature wherever you are is constantly in flux. So if you start your test at 8 o'clock in the morning and you run that test through 10 o'clock in the morning, and then you work on the system and start the next test at 11 o'clock in the morning, now your temp difference between 8 and 11 is going to be markedly different because the sun has moved and the building you're in will have, you know, the HVAC, whatever, will adjust for that. This test, however, we're doing this test relatively quickly. This whole thing will be done in 45 minutes, right? 15 minutes to run the test, 15 minutes to change the compound, 15 minutes to run the next. So the ambient room temperature shouldn't change much in 45 minutes. So no, I'm not going to account for it because you at home, you're not accounting for your ambient room temperature. When you see your system temperatures, do you think, well, let me check that against my room temperature? No, nobody I'm aware of does that. It's only done in testing. And I like to keep things real. I like to keep things realistic. How do people do it at home? How does this actually apply to the real world? Now, if you run your system in a scientific enclosure with a controlled environment, then the test results you get are not accurate. So that being said, I'm not considering ambient room temperature because it's just not going to change by much in the next 15 minutes. Now I need to get this cable unplugged and out of my way. And I'm done with that flash drive. I get that out of there. And I guess I should go back to full screen on the main camera so you guys can see me. There we go. Carey, is there a brand of computer that you recommend that is better than the others? The only computer brand I recommend is yours. In other words, you build it, make it yours, your brand. That's the best computer for the money, the value, the overall reliability. It'll always be better when you build it yourself. There's no brand that comes anywhere close to the quality and to the value of doing it yourself. I think people that ask those kind of questions, you're more, that line of thinking is more in line with an Apple user. Like you want somebody else to make all these decisions for you. That's sort of an Apple thing. So here in the Windows world, one of the great advantages we have is we can customize things, not only to our own personality, but we can customize things to the way we're going to use the system. Maybe we need a lot more RAM and less storage, or maybe we need a lot more storage, but not much for a video card. Maybe we need a great big video card and a lot of storage and a lot of RAM. We want cases with glass panels and RGB lighting, and we have all those options and all those choices. And at the end of the day, when you see what you get for the money, it'll far outpace what you get from the money from any manufacturer, especially Apple. So what you're paying for is you're paying somebody else to make those decisions for you. I can't get on board with that. Not on something so personal as a personal computer. That is what the P in PC stands for, last I checked. All right, let's get this heatsink off of here. This one has screws on it. That's interesting. Let me get this unplugged and out of the way. I think the electric drill would be good for taking the screws out. I wouldn't want to put them in with this, but I could certainly take them out. Now, when I talk about how the thermal compound is applied. The reason I make that face is it's not so much that it's done improperly on purpose, it's done thoughtlessly. And the result is not the same kind of result that you would have if you did it yourself when you were, you had the pride and took the care and the time and the amount of time it's going to take you to apply your thermal compound, they will have applied thermal compound to 40 machines. So, when you start taking apart machines, can I tell the one you did versus the one an automated process did? Probably. This is what the thermal compound in an automated process looks like. This is very common. You're like, what thermal compound, right? Look, there's barely any right through the middle here, this is the hottest part, right here in the middle. Although on modern CPUs with built-in GPUs, the whole area does get hot. So where's the rest of it? Well, if you look real closely, let's see if I can get you zoomed in on the CPU. If you look real closely there, let's get in a little closer. You can see that there's no thermal compound along here, big empty space right here, which probably aligns, see if I can bring this up. See that little chunk right there? Probably goes in that little hole. You can see it's not really a very good coverage on the CPU. And what is there so lightly you can almost see right through it. So what I want to do is wipe all that off. We want to get all the existing thermal compound off of there. And to do so, the first thing I'll do is grab a paper towel and just wipe it. Now, having seen this, I'm going to adjust my prediction, and I'm going to say there's going to be at least a 5-degree centigrade difference cooler. I will be surprised if we hit 80 degrees after 16 minutes of Prime 95 when I'm done. Now again, these are just predictions. They're based on general experience. Been doing this for 29 years. And sometimes that experience makes me more accurate, and sometimes it doesn't. So no matter what I predict, it doesn't change reality. All right, so I'm just predicting for fun. Don't hold me to it. The worst case scenario is I get done and the temperature goes higher than 85 degrees centigrade. Then you're like, I'm never listening to this guy ever again. And I wouldn't blame you, quite frankly. It's something seriously wrong. So it's not like anything's on the line. Now what I've got here is some denatured alcohol. You can use rubbing alcohol. You want the highest alcohol content possible. I know like at Walmart they sell different strengths of rubbing alcohol. There's like a 70%, a 90%. You want the highest strength. And what you want to do is you want to clean all the old thermal material off the top of the heat spreader here on top of the CPU. You're like, what's the heat spreader? That's the entire top of the CPU. That big metal top is the IHS, or the internal heat spreader. And then do the same thing with the bottom of the heatsink. Now this heatsink is a little troubling because you'll see it doesn't even have a copper core. This is all aluminum. And copper transfers heat a lot better. It costs a little bit more money, it's a bit heavier. But you do get what you pay for. And for whatever reason, Alienware decided we're going to sell you a high-end computer. We're going to boast about how great Alienwares are, how superior we are with a price tag to match, and then we're going to give you a stock cooler, basically, which is nothing special, nothing to write home about. And in fact, some stock coolers are a lot better than this. This stock cooler is relatively thin. There's not much radiator here. The fan is relatively small, considering that's like a 40 millimeter fan, 60. It's tiny. Now, if this had a copper core, the size of the radiator and the fan wouldn't bother me. But the combination of all three, it's poor all the way around. Now, that being said, this is what you should come to expect from any PC manufacturer. Remember, they're not a charity. They're not there to give you, to walk away making $1. They want to walk away making as many dollars as possible, but at the same time not lose you to their competition who might be a little cheaper. So how do you get there as a business owner? How do you compete? Well, you cut corners everywhere you can that don't affect the specifications of the PC necessarily that the average consumer is looking at when they buy. So how many people look at what kind of heatsink a computer has before they purchase it? I'm not aware of a single one that's ever happened. I'm not even aware of a retail store that will allow you to take the side panel off and look. And yet, how many people who've built one themselves know exactly what kind of heatsink they have? Every single one of them. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. I'm still trying to get all the dirt off of this. You see it's got some dark areas here. Those just aren't coming up. Well, mostly what I'm trying to get off is the old thermal compound. It doesn't have to be perfect. On many heat sinks, it'll have almost like a mirror finish. This one does not, because it's this aluminum, it's dull, it's sort of a matte finish. The other thing you can do is you can just keep rubbing with a Q-tip and denatured alcohol or rubbing alcohol until the Q-tip stops coming up with so much black. Now, it's quite possible that no matter what you do, it's just going to keep pulling stuff up. And at some point, you're going to go, well, this is never going to end. I'm just going to do one more. It sort of depends how driven you are. But to spend that much time on a heatsink that's not even that good to begin with, even if this thing was planed down again and polished, it's just not going to run much better. It's just not a good design to begin with. Remember, this is an i7. That's awfully small for an i7. I mean, if you compare that to what you normally see me use, like the Mugen 5 or even the Evo 212, this is nothing. And there's no way to really put a bigger heatsink in here, because when we close the power supply in, we're going to run into an issue of depth with regards to the height of the cooler. So you're just locked in based on the design. Now, if you're locked in based on the design of the system you built, that's your fault. You knew what you chose. You knew the parts you selected. This is you're buying a box. It's sort of a mystery box. And until you open it and look in it, can't really be sure what's on the inside, apart from you might know your graphics card and you might know your amount of RAM and your CPU, but you don't know necessarily how upgradable it is, how modular it is, or how expandable it is. For example, I can see I cannot add another 3.5-inch drive. I can add 2.5-inch drives down here, and that's it. So a total of 3 drives. Now, I'm sure somewhere on the packaging it probably said something about that. Not typically something the normal consumer looks at, again, when they're purchasing a computer. It just doesn't occur to them until they need it, and that's often months or years after the purchase. All right, so I'm going to show you how I apply thermal compound. There's this weird sort of cult of thermal compound where people are obsessed with only one way to do it right. Well, much like life itself, there's many different ways to do it right, and you can apply the thermal compound in any manner that you choose. as a professional technician in business for 20 plus years, plus working in the industry for 29 years, this is what I've learned to do that's most reliable and most effective. So where I'm coming from is a position that holds me liable. If you do it a different way, it's your problem. Or not, or your benefit for that matter. Now, the thermal compound I'm going to use is really nothing special. What I've got here is Noctua NTH1. The reason I buy this is because it's a pretty big tube for the money. There's numerous applications worth of thermal compound in this tube. Let's see if I can get you a close-up of how I do this. Let's zoom in. Give it a second to focus. Here we go. Now, normally I would lay the computer flat, but I'm going to leave it upright so you can watch what I'm doing. If I can get this cap off the thermal compound. That's a new problem. There it goes. I guess the thermal compound dried and kind of became like glue there or something, or I just don't know my own strength and I tightened it too much. They're only applying thermal compound to the CPU itself. Do not apply thermal compound to the heatsink. Keep your fingers off of the bottom of the heatsink and the top of the CPU after you've cleaned it. I can touch it because I'm wearing nitrile gloves. These are not rubber gloves. Rubber gloves would be bad, okay? Rubber gloves can condone and encourage electrostatic discharge. Nitrile gloves are what you want to use if you need to wear gloves. Now, the reason I wear a glove is not because I'm a fan of Michael Jackson, but because I only need the one so that I can use one of the clean fingers of the glove to apply the thermal compound evenly across the entire surface of the CPU. If you just put like a dab in the middle, you don't know if you've got too little on there when you put the heatsink on because you can't see under it. You don't know if you've got full coverage. If you put too much on, you'll know that because it'll ooze out and make a big mess when you put your heatsink on. Some people are worried about air bubbles. That's silly because this is not a system that's being submerged in water. And air bubbles that occur on the thermal compound, they move. And there is a solution for that, by the way, if it really bothers you. And it's so basic and simple, you'll probably hit yourself in the head that you didn't think of it. But if you just tap on the thermal compound, watch what it does. You see all the little bumps and ridges it's making? So what that's going to do is that's going to give you the opportunity for that thermal compound to spread out and discourage those bubbles that people make a big deal about. Bubbles, by the way, that actually make no difference whatsoever in your cooling unless you're an extreme overclocker and you care about 1/3 of 1 degree difference. Now, while I've got it off here, I've made a little bit of a mess. And I can take my Q-tip right now and just kind of clean that up a little. Not that I have to, but again, I take pride in my work. Nobody's ever going to see that because the CPU heatsink is going to cover that whole area up. But just to clean it up a little bit, so it's nowhere near as messy. And now, and let me just take a look with my flashlight because I still have a hard time seeing here. That's pretty good coverage. I kind of feel like I could use a little bit more. But I think I'm going to leave it. It's a tough call. I'm basing it on what I normally expect to see with regards to consistency and thickness. And as long as you can't see through it, as long as I can't see through any metal of the, that we're covering, it's sort of like painting. Want a nice thick coat of paint on there. Finger painting. Now I can reapply the heatsink, and let me back the camera off a little bit here for that. Let's go back. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this with the system upright like this. This is going to be a little bit of a challenge. I do want a regular screwdriver. I don't want to tighten it with the electric screwdriver because it could cause an imbalance with regards to the screws going in too far on one side. And you want to tighten each screw in opposite corners for that reason. Let me just start somewhere here. I think I might be off by one angle. I think it's got to go on this way. That looks better. Then I want to start this other corner. I'll tell you what's throwing me is the fan is tilted. So you can see these screws. I was trying to put this screw in higher than where it goes because I was looking at making this fan straight. The fan is actually on a bit of an angle here. So pay attention to those little details if you're doing this yourself, especially on a pre-built machine, because they just do some weird stuff that's not typical that you would see on a YouTube video, you know. Now these screws just go until they stop. And again, just keep going to opposite corners so that there's no warpage, that there's the surface of the heatsink and the bottom of this, I'm sorry, the surface of the CPU and the bottom of the heatsink want to have complete contact. You don't want it lopsided or warped, so that if you tighten the screws down on one side first and you do the other side, it could lead to a warp that you're just not going to see. It's very similar to how they put tires on a car. They use what's called the star pattern. They do every opposite bolt, and that's to ensure the tire doesn't get warped, or the rim doesn't get warped when tightening those bolts. Now, in some heatsink, many heatsink applications, you can really crank down on those screws, and then you have to use your judgment as to when to stop, because if you break the head off with a screw, you've over-tightened it. Thanks for the help. In this design, in the way that they've done it, because this is built in an assembly line, they have to dumb down the process as much as possible to increase success rates and of products that are past quality control. So these screws actually come to a dead stop. So it would be very difficult for anybody working on the line to break them. There's no question. When they stop, they stop. And that's not typical of many third-party CPUs, of systems that you would build yourself. So let me plug the CPU fan back in, which let's see, there's two plugs right next to each other. Okay, the one on the right says CPU fan right there. And then I have to put the CPU power back on to the motherboard. I want to use that cable so that the other one doesn't hit the fan like yesterday. Didn't cause any damage, just really annoying. I've left that one on, so we're good there for video power. And now, let's put the CPU in the off position. Let's plug video back into the video card. So we'll get the monitor plugged in here. Like that. Come on. And power. Power right here. Flip that to on. I think I'm all hooked up. Let's hit the power switch. Fan is turning. Okay, everything's turning. Let's go over to camera 2. Here we go. It's finishing those updates. All right. And we'll wait for that to load. Now I've lost my icons, so I'm going to turn the icons back on for a moment. Right click, view, show desktop icons, and let's bring up hardware monitor. And then Prime 95. And let's start running Prime 95. Here we go. Let me start the clock. Let's take a quick look over here. All right, and we'll just keep an eye on that. We're going to let that run for 16 minutes as we did the last test. And unless it hits 85 before that happens, or it goes above 85 degrees centigrade, then I will stop the test early. And then where did I go? Hold on, let me get myself in the picture here. Give me a second. That should have worked. Okay. Okay, so same exact test. All we've done is change the thermal compound. We're not using an expensive thermal compound. I think this is about $8. And there's probably, 8 applications. So it's about $1 an application. It's pretty inexpensive. For what you get, it's good. If you spend a lot of money on your thermal compound, you probably won't see more than a degree of difference. So it gets to be this, and you're gonna hear me use this term a lot when it comes to computers, but you get diminishing returns. There gets to be a point that once you surpass that point, the difference starts to become negligible. And so while that's running, I'm going to just move this stuff out of the way. So the max we're hitting right now is 73 degrees centigrade, and we are 10 seconds away from being 3 minutes into the test. So I don't remember if it got that hot that quick, but 73 actually isn't that bad. It's really not bad. So we'll wait and see what happens, see how it ramps up, especially between 15 and 16 minutes. That seemed to really make the difference. Might have to start going 16 minutes on these tests. David Martinez says, thanks, Carey. I had to put thermal paste on my PC. Thought it was going to be hard, but it was easy, and your videos helped. Thermal, not thermo, thermal. But yes, and good on you. Just be careful. If you're fixing a problem that doesn't exist, it'd be a shame that you broke it in the process, right? Thomas has contributed $2. He says, what's your opinion on all-in-one liquid coolers? Basically, they're an enthusiast product only. No corporation uses them. No job that you have will put you in front of a desk with a liquid cooler in the computer. It's very unlikely to occur. It's really just something home users do that for the most part is entirely unnecessary. But home users do lots of things that are unnecessary. Corporations, they tend to go out of business when they make a habit out of spending money they don't need to spend or spending time and labor on unnecessary things. So you'll see me leaning more towards the corporate world processes and procedures because they're more efficient, they're better bang for the dollar, and at the end of the day, you end up with a system that's ultimately far more reliable. Liquid coolers will need to be changed about every 4 or 5 years, depending, because the heat pump will die. It's just the way it works. Not the heat pump, the water pump will die. It's going to die, and you're going to have to replace it. And it's going to be sort of a big job, to have to take the whole thing back apart. That being said, with an air cooler, the most you have to do is maybe change the thermal compound, which you would still have to do on a liquid cooler at the same time frame if you were going to do that, or change a fan. That's it, which can be done without any undoing of cable management. Not to mention the air cooler's probably going to be quieter and far less expensive. Now, for people who overclock and they want 4 milliseconds of performance difference, I can't really have a reasonable discussion with people like that. But again, you reach a point of diminishing returns on overclocking a modern CPU. You can buy a K CPU, which is overclockable, and do nothing to it. It'll already be 10% faster than... Sorry about that. It's more Amazon, more and more. Oh boy. All right. Max temp still looks like 73, has not budged, has it? Or am I not seeing it right? Oops. Come back this way, full screen. Yeah, 73 is still our max after 8 minutes, just past 8 minutes right now on the test. I think I can adjust that so you guys can see it any better. Is that the dog bell? Yeah, that's what it is. The dog bell. Pavlov's dogs. Do you think AMD will overthrow Intel with their new generation of processors? No, AMD doesn't have the business market. The corporate world is what drives the world financially. So the corporate world is where you're probably going to get a job if you don't have one, or where your parents have had or are working. That's what creates revenue for people to go and buy things like computers for their home and liquid coolers and things that corporations would never use. And the corporations drive the industry with regards to pushing for faster CPUs. Gaming drives video cards, and gaming drives sales of liquid coolers and overclocking things and RGB lighting. Business doesn't drive any of that. So if you look at the total amount of value in each market, if you say, well, How much money does a liquid cooler manufacturer make? What's their annual revenue? And then look at what the annual revenue of a standard OEM cooler manufacturer. It's not even close. So we're looking at niche things that people somehow think the world revolves around, which is the opposite. It's the other way around. The diesel fuel, just to give you an idea, diesel fuel is sort of a leftover from refining gasoline. In the same way that liquid coolers and RGB lighting is sort of left over in the process of the manufacturing of computers for business. That's what makes the world go around. That's why you have power to your house. That's why you're able to communicate with me over the internet. That's why the internet exists, because of business. Now, because we can take that and offshoot it into gaming and offshoot it into other niche areas, that's another revenue source, but it is not the primary source of revenue. It is not the thing that drives the industry forward. Gaming does drive parts of the industry forward, but it doesn't drive the majority of the industry forward. Now, that being said, AMD's got a decent product, but it needs time to mature, to prove itself. And furthermore, it takes more than a good CPU. You also need to have a good chipset. So the chipset is yet to be proven. There are some downsides to AMD. Every time I read somebody promoting AMD, they always give AMD an excuse. Well, that's because it's new, or that's because of this. But when Intel does it, they go, shame on them. It's a very interesting psychology that when you choose one manufacturer over the other, it really doesn't matter to anybody but you. It really doesn't. Like if you want to buy a Ford instead of a Chevy, you shouldn't need me to agree with you on which one's better. You should feel confident in your decision-making process that it does not require the approval of others. And as long as you're looking for people to agree with you, you're looking for a fight, or you don't have enough self-confidence to firmly make a decision for yourself, that you're looking for other people on the internet or other people that you communicate with, even in real life, what you're looking for is for somebody to agree with you. And I'm going to suggest you learn how to train yourself out of that, because that's going to lead you through a lifetime of disappointment. That's been my experience. When you've learned how to stop asking people what they think, when you've learned to stop caring because you already know what's best for you, that's all that matters. If you and I sat down at a restaurant and you asked me what the best thing on the menu was, and it was something that you think is disgusting, does it make me wrong? And when you order for yourself, don't you order with confidence? Don't you say, yeah, that sounds like something that I might enjoy? I mean, if you didn't, why would you order it? But if you're asking strangers, what's the best thing on the menu, and they don't know anything about you and what your tastes are, or maybe how much you're planning to spend, or how hungry you might be, their answer is completely irrelevant to you. It's like asking somebody how you should get your hair cut. Do you do that? Where are we at on our test? We're 13 minutes in, and how are we doing? Let's take a look. 80 degrees centigrade is our max temp so far. So far, I called it at 5 degrees, right? So if this climbs any higher than that, then the thermal compound did not make much of a difference. And in fact, if it's exactly the same as what it once was, or is worse, there's a lesson in there somewhere, but time will tell. Some answers can only be determined through time. Like, how long is this going to take to heal? When it's healed, you'll know. And in the case of how hot is this going to get, after 16 minutes, we're going to know in about 2 more minutes. We're just approaching 14 minutes on the test, cranking up to 83 degrees centigrade on the temp. So what that tells me is we have more of a heat sink limitation than a thermal compound limitation. That's what I'm going to go with at this point. Like, I could put the world's best thermal compound on there, but the heat sink is still going to be crappy, and the fan's still going to be small. So it's sort of like putting $2,000 tires on a $200 car. Think about it. Now I'm starting to suspect I don't know, we might just hit 85 again. Let's find out here. We're at 14 minutes and 40 seconds right now. And just keep an eye on it here, because this is where it starts to crank up. It's 10 seconds away from 15 minutes. And that between 15 and 16 minutes is really when I heard the fan really crank up behind me. We'll see if that happens again. 84 degrees centigrade. So we're 1 degree cooler than we were so far. We could actually go hotter than we were. Though I'm going to stick to my guns on this and say I think it's just the heatsink and the fan just doing all they can, regardless of the thermal compound. But it hasn't ramped up yet like it did last time. We're at 15 minutes and 30 seconds. We've got 30 seconds to go on the test. We just dropped a degree. Oh, no, we didn't. We're at 84. Sorry, we're still at 84. So we're 1 degree away from our max temp before the thermal compound. And again, accounting for ambient room temperature. Oh, no, there we go. We're at 85 right there with 12 seconds to go. 10 seconds, 9, 8, 7, 86, 87. Oh, we're getting hotter. 3, 2, 1, 0. So there we are. We're at 87 degrees centigrade. We're actually hotter than we were. So there you go. 88. Should I just let it run and see how hot it's going to get? 16 minutes and 15 seconds right now. Maybe I'll let it go to 17 just because I can. I'm kind of curious now. So it ran a little bit hotter than it had run before. 16 minutes and 30 seconds, 88 degree, 89, still warming up. 16 minutes and 40 seconds. We're approaching 17 minutes and we hit a 90 degree centigrade maximum temp. Now, there are a couple things. First of all, this isn't a problem, okay? We didn't have a problem to fix. But if we were trying to make it better, I'm not quite sure we made any difference whatsoever. Let me go ahead and stop the test and you can see how fast. Oh, now it's finally cranking up. There it goes. It took a lot longer for that to occur. I'll hit stop on the test. And then you'll see these temps over here are going to drop really quickly. These are our maximum temperatures recorded on the right, our coolest temperatures right at boot up, and then our current temperatures right now on the individual cores in the entire package. So there you have it. Under normal usage, you would never push the CPU that hard for that long, and that's why it's really not a problem that needed to be addressed. However, I was very uncomfortable with the lack of thermal compound on the bottom of that heatsink, and I really thought that just by having better coverage, it would have made a couple degrees difference, up to 5 degrees difference, but it didn't. It didn't at all. And I want to emphasize that I believe that is the limitation of the heatsink. And no matter what we do for thermal compound, it just isn't going to make a difference like a bigger, better heatsink and fan would do. But we really can't change it because the limitation of the case doesn't allow that. Now, I am sure somewhere in my office I have a heatsink that'll fit it from Intel with a copper core, but I'd have to retrofit it for screws because mine are all, push-ins. And even then, if it's a 1/2 inch too tall and I do all that work and I can't close the lid for the power supply, and it's all for what? So I can run Prime 95 for 20 minutes? Who does that? That's not work. That's not a realistic issue to be concerned about. It wouldn't occur under normal usage. So here's what I do know. I know that I've looked under there. I know that there was thermal compound that was original to the system, and it was not applied, in my opinion, well enough for good coverage. I've replaced it with fresh thermal compound that is applied correctly. And so when I ship it back to the customer, I don't have to wonder if that can be an issue. If any future problems were to arise, I don't have to worry about, could it be the thermal compound? I know for a fact now it's not. So this avoids problems. This is being proactive. But at the same time, it probably would have been just as good if I left it alone in this scenario. Now, your case may vary depending on the situation involving your PC and what kind of cooling you have now. As long as that CPU stays under 100 degrees centigrade, you're fine and you don't have anything to fix. Once it hits 100 degrees centigrade, it starts to throttle down and protect itself, which slows it down. It still doesn't hurt anything, but you may find your computer becoming momentarily sluggish for brief moments as it cools down and then ramps back up again. And if it gets hot again, it'll cool back down and slow down again. So that very rarely happens in the real world. I've even seen customers that have had their CPU fans entirely disconnected and didn't know it because they're browsing the web, opening Excel and Word. If that CPU was throttling down, they're not noticing it. So the people that are sort of obsessed with these benchmarks, in the real world, they really don't matter. We don't run benchmarks in the corporate world, not unless we're trying to isolate a specific and unique problem. It is not something normal. And in fact, in most corporate environments I've been in, it's faster to just replace the machine than to spend any labor trying to figure out what's wrong with that one. Although that machine would go back either under warranty and let the manufacturer deal with it, or it would go back to a special department in IT that sort of has a rack of computers that they work on, and that's all they do. And when those are ready, they go back up on the other shelf where they can be swapped out for another one, and then the broken one can go in, and they're all cookie cutter, they're all the same in most corporate environments. So that's generally the way it works, and ultimately, having it work is the main thing. Whether it's running at 60 degrees, 70 degrees, 80 degrees, or 90 degrees, it's running the same. And it's operating within its design. There's no harm. So there you have it. We replaced the thermal compound. Didn't make it any better. I really don't think I made it worse. I think it just, those test results will run that way regardless. But even if we made it worse, which I can't imagine how that's possible, it made a difference of 2 degrees. And when I let it run for the extra full minute, then it went up 6 degrees over 85, but I didn't run the other one. And there's no way for me to go back and put it back the way it was to rerun those tests. That's why you got to be careful when you're doing your own testing. If you really want to see the difference, run the test 3 times. You're probably going to get 3 different, I probably wouldn't have hit 85 every single time running, 15 minutes 3 times in a row. But who wants to spend that kind of time on a live video to just keep repeating the same thing? So ultimately, all that matters is the real world. And in the real world, all I can say is I know that if there's a problem with the computer, it won't have anything to do with the thermal compound. That's fresh and replaced. All right. And once again, it's very unrealistic for anybody to push a CPU at 100% on all of its cores for 15 or 17 minutes, whatever 16 minutes I was doing. People just don't use computers that way. There might be somebody out there who does. There's probably somebody who's going to write to me and go, well, I do. You're an exception. You don't represent the extreme vast majority of computer owners. And those of you who do push computers that hard certainly don't need to be taking advice from me, because look how much you already know. So that looks good. I think I can go ahead and shut all this down. Let's close this. And let's close this. And let's close this. And let's shut her down. We'll go back over to my main camera. All right. Now, does anybody have any questions regarding cooling or any concerns about anything I'm saying not making sense, or you feel that I'm not being accurate or truthful? Because this would be the time. Call me out. In the meantime, I'm going to unplug this. Now I feel confident that I can work on the cable management for the power supply. And then we have the Elgato capture card to plug in. And then I think it'll be ready to ship back to the customer so I can start a new build tomorrow. And I'm sure this customer is very anxious. I'm sure Daniel is very anxious to get his computer back. TJ Hagan says, hello, Carey, from mid-Michigan. Good to see you again. Hey, TJ, welcome in. Fred Schellenberg says, hey, everybody, just completed my i7 9700K system in a fractal design define R6 case. Nice. Paul Stratford says, I bought your Windows 10 optimizer today. Really pleased with it. Right on, Paul. Thank you. Thanks for supporting the channel. Do any non-overclocked CPUs run hot enough to warrant an aftermarket cooler? Any K CPU from Intel, and I think the X CPUs from AMD don't include coolers. You have to buy one. But yeah, a Core i7, a non-K Core i7 from Intel will include a cooler, but it's not a good cooler. In that case, you'd want to replace it with a third-party cooler just to bring the noise down. Because if you're pushing that CPU even slightly, that fan can get uncomfortably loud. And for a couple of years, Intel was including really good fans. And I said, hey, forget what I said about those fans, those stock fans not being good enough. They are good enough. And then they went back again, back to crappy, inadequate size heat sinks, in my opinion. So then I had to go back to say, forget what I said about forgetting what I said, because now they're crap again. So if you're going to get an i5 or an i3, the stock fan is fine. Even on this AMD 2700X that I'm streaming with, that Wraith Spire cooler is loud. It's not a good cooler, but look at the pretty lights. Okay, it would benefit from a Mugen 5 on this 2700X. I can tell you that for sure. I could do without the pretty lights to have a system that's silent. Just sort of looking through the comments right now. Intel heatsinks for i7s used to be double the height and have a copper base. This is true. In fact, I think I have a couple I can demonstrate exactly what you're saying. Because Intel has kind of flip-flopped on this, and I don't know why. But let me grab a couple here out of my stack, out of my stash. Let's see, we got this one, we got this one, and we got this one. Now, you're going to see a pretty big difference here. This is very similar to what we took off. This is still wrapped as it came out of the box. So whatever CPU this came with, we didn't even, this has never ever been used. I think all I did is I cleaned the thermal paste off of it so it didn't rub off, because it comes stock with the thermal compound pre-applied on these included heat sinks and fans. And this probably came from an i5 or an i7. But before that, they had a copper base. See the copper through the center, it's copper core. Other than that, it's very similar. I bet you if I took this base off of here and swapped it with that one, Oh, you're giving me ideas. You're really giving me ideas. I think that's the same exact. Hold on a minute. Hold that thought. My Intel i7 965 CPU cost $1,000, and it came with this heatsink. Now, I want you to look at the difference. And look at the bottom. Even some of the fins are copper. Which cooler do you think performs better? This one or this one? And how much difference do you think thermal compound is going to make compared to changing the coolers out? Regardless of any thermal compound, if you're choosing any way you want to apply it, which do you think is going to make a bigger difference? Changing the thermal compound or changing the cooler? So that's the lesson to be learned here. Now, I didn't think I was going to do this, but now you guys, I don't know, you're kind of egging me on. Is it possible for me to retrofit this fan to this cooler? I don't think so. It appears. It appears there are some unique mounting points here on this heatsink. These little tunnels that the screws go through. Looks like the fan is actually the same size as the Intel fan, although the blades, yeah, maybe they are the same. What I'm trying to figure out is this, where these screws are attached, there's little plastic towers on the one I've got. And that may not be transferable to the new one. Looks like it was molded that way. I don't recall seeing anything under it when I was looking at it earlier that would signify that those are removable. And again, if we look at the height, if we were to put this in there, this one would probably fit, but I am concerned that this screws in. This doesn't use the standard mounting technique of a system you would build at home. But you guys have got me so curious. What an unusual design. Motherboard's even branded with the Alienware head. It's possible that there's a back plate behind this motherboard that could come off and give us the standard mounting mechanism to mount this with the push, with the traditional mounting technique of a standard stock fan. Boy, that's really got me curious now to look behind it. But to look behind it, I have to take the whole thing out. There's no way to just take the back panel off on this. I'd have to take the motherboard out and then see if there's a back plate that's removable. And if it is, then I could remove it, put everything all back together, and then use this copper core-based stock Intel heatsink instead, which would probably run better. But here's the difference, and here's what we're chasing after. Nothing. We're chasing after nothing. Because let's say I did all that. Let's say I went through all that work and I took that motherboard off, and there was a back plate that I could remove, and I could put it all back together, and I could put that heatsink on, and I can run Prime 95 again and get temps that never break 78 degrees centigrade. So what? The system still runs exactly the same. It wasn't ever throttling. It was still running within its the way it was designed to run. And what happens if I do all that and I find out this fan's a lot louder? So maybe I have a better cooler, but a louder fan. Am I going to have a happier customer because the machine's running cooler, even though it's not making any difference in the performance and reliability? but it's noisier? Or would they be better having it run exactly as the way they, temperature-wise, the way they sent it to me, but also is quiet as they sent it to me? It never got loud until we hit 91 degrees centigrade. That's when or 90, that's when it really cranked up. So why would I go through all that effort and all that work to achieve so little in return that ultimately doesn't make a difference in performance or reliability? This is something, if you got a lot of time on your hands and you're very curious and it's an experiment, that's all well and good. You can't run a business that way. You can't hold customers up while you sit there and tinker and toy. Now you can tinker and toy with your own all day. So these are the things that I face. Like when I see a lot of other YouTube videos where they're doing this weird testing, I'm like, this does not represent any real world activity in where you would get paid to do the job. This is stuff no one would ever pay you to do. So if no one's going to pay you to do it, is it worth doing? At least with regards to investing time and effort. There is a value to the level of education you get with regards to understanding, a general understanding of the thermodynamics of cases and computers and fans and heat sinks and thermal compound. But how practical is that information in real life? Now that you've got it, then what do you do with it? Depends how far ahead you want to think on that. So for me, running a business, knowing I've got other systems I got to get done, knowing that it doesn't ultimately make any difference. If it does run cooler, it's still going to run exactly the same performance, same exact reliability. Doesn't make any sense to put in the time. Yeah, I think I thought that one all the way through. Did I leave anything out? Carey, an RTX card will not fit in that case. Sure does look like it will. Why not? Speaking of an RTX card, this will be used in tomorrow's build. There it is. It's in a big box. But I do believe it's the same length as this 1070. I think it is. Because I think that's the maximum length of a graphics card. I don't think they make them any bigger. And we don't have any problem if we have to go, if the card takes up 3 slots, we still have the availability this way. What's the length on this card? It should say on the back of it here somewhere. Let's see. $650 watt or greater system power supply. Well, that's just what we put in. I don't see a size on the card. So that's going to go to in the system tomorrow. This card here. This one belongs to Madi, who I think is still in the chat room. So anyway, I do believe that card is no longer than this one. I think this is as long as the cards get. That's an industry standard, if I'm not mistaken. But somebody could probably look that up for me while I'm doing this. You could look up the length of a GeForce GTX 1070 and look up the length of a GeForce RTX 2080 Ti. I think they're the same length. And I know the power supply's got connectors for it, so there won't be any problem there. Should be fine. It's not going in that case regardless, but that is something, this card that I'm holding is going into tomorrow's build. But the owner of this Alienware, they want to be able to upgrade the card in about a year to whatever they want to upgrade to. And as far as I can tell, there's no limitation. What am I missing? The RTX 2080 Ti is 270 millimeters. Somebody's saying 318 millimeters. And this is what happens when you get information off the internet. You know, something that's a very simple, factual thing to look up, and people can't even agree on fact. So I don't know what it is. Now someone's giving the measure in centimeters, which doesn't match. Now we have 3 different sizes. Now someone's giving the measurement in inches. Oh, good. Let's not all use the same. Look, I don't care what form of measurement we want to use, if we want to use millimeters, centimeters, or inches, but we need to pick one. They're saying 267 millimeter for the GTX 1070 and 270 millimeter on the 2080 Ti Black. So the 3 millimeter difference, I don't think it's going to be a problem. I think there's more than 3 millimeters between the end of this card and that fan. I don't know. Really don't know. I think it's going to fit fine. What size is my shirt collar? Let me see something. This is not going to provide me an accurate enough measurement. This is 10.5 inches in length. You know what they say about a guy with a big video card? Got a big wallet. And this card doesn't give me a size on it. So, let me Google it. Wrong mouse. So 10.5 inches to millimeters. I want to deal in millimeters only because that's what I see most measurements. Looks like 266.7 millimeters on the card currently installed. And the RTX 2080 Ti is 267 millimeters. And what did I say? 266.7? It's 267. They're exactly the same length. They're exactly the same length. It's an industry standard. Conversation's over. So frustrating. L Pope says, just try the card. No, I'm not. That card is not going in here. That card is staying in the box. It's very expensive and it belongs to another customer. It is not meant to be used as a guinea pig to answer some hard-headed person who doesn't want to accept facts. I'm not doing it. However, I will tell you, it is an industry standard size on the graphics cards. It has to be, because case manufacturers, well, you would be, you would have a hard time finding the right case for your graphics card. Like this Corsair 200R you see me use, I guarantee that'll fit that video card all day long. As will the case I'm using tomorrow, as does this case. What a coincidence. Isn't that crazy how that all just seems to go together like that? So anyway, common sense. Now, if you have a micro ATX case or anything smaller than a mid-tower, it may or may not accept the full-length cards. But I even believe that the Xenos case, I believe that'll take that full-length card. And the small case that I worked on, what was that called? Can't think of it. The M case N1, or the N case M1 will take a full-length card. So that's typically how we refer to it in the industry. We just say it's a full-length card. It's not as though there were numerous full-length cards of various sizes. Full-length should be whatever that measurement was, 267 millimeters. I don't think there's a card longer than that exists. Certainly no bigger than 270, right? I mean, give or take for a little molding around the edges, but yeah. Actually, most 3-fan cards are much larger than the industry standard. I suppose that would be true, wouldn't it? If a card had 3 fans on it, depending on the size of each fan, it's really hard to say, because I've installed 3-card fans that appear to be the same length as a 2-card fan, but I never actually put them side by side to check. I think I might be overthinking this, guys. But, you know, I'm the one who invited questions, so I only have myself to blame. Rick says we need to start using feet to measure them as these GPUs keep getting bigger and bigger. Right. All right. Well, I'm glad to see you all participating in the chat, regardless of where you're sourcing your information from and if we agree or disagree. William Murdoch says it's 298 millimeters for a Vega 56 ROG Strix. When it comes to AMD, you know, I believe that's true. Now I'm kind of curious what kind of wattage we're pulling out of this bad boy, just the way it sits. So let me put this stuff away. Let me grab the heat sinks here and get these put away, and then I can run my next test on here. Should be done with that. This is all the hard thermal compound that I peeled off of there. You can see that was not liquefied at all. However, when the CPU does heat up, that thermal compound also becomes more viscous. And that also is a reason why air bubbles aren't an issue, because once it hits temperature, it's fluid. You know, it can sort of move around. And that's what it's supposed to do. And as it heats up and it's more viscous, it can fit on all those little microscopic nooks and crannies, which is why you want a thin layer of thermal compound. Putting on too much, putting on too little can be an issue. However, there's quite a lot of leeway between too much and too little, as you just witnessed. Yeah, I'm kind of curious what sort of power consumption this is consuming right now with this configuration. So I think what I want to do is run the Heaven benchmark on it while I monitor my kilowatt power meter that's going to tell us how much power this machine's drawing out of the wall during the test. Let's do that, because I'm just curious. Really wanted to do this with the old power supply, which was, you know, about half, a little bit more than half of the potential power output that one has. But since we're here, I'm just curious. Again, it won't be a problem. There's nothing here to fix, but it helps me to understand current power draws on modern systems. That enables me to make predictions, you know, that power supply should be fine for that configuration with these kind of experiences. So why not? We got time. Let's see, power this back on. We'll flip over to camera 2. Okay, we'll log in. And I need flash drive. What do I do with it? Just unplugged it a minute ago. Oh, I put it over here. Okay. Plug this back in. Okay, so in my PC testing software subdirectory, I want the Heaven benchmark. Let's plug in these applications. I need the Visual C. Computer does not meet the requirements to install the software. Oh, it's already got a newer version on it. All right, well, maybe I just need to install Unigen's Heaven benchmark then, if it doesn't need those prerequisites, because it probably got them from other games that this customer has already installed. Let's enter a name. Okay, name. Happy now? Finish. Heaven. Run. Oops. Okay, it's loaded. Probably telling me there's probably a newer driver for the graphics card, I imagine. All right, now I think, what is it, F10? What is it to start the test? F10, isn't it? Oh, wrong button, wrong over here. F9? Okay, it's F9. All right, so it's benchmarking now with the GeForce GTX 1070. And I realize it's a little small up there, but let me move it over here. That looks pretty good. What kind of power are we pulling from the wall right now? $210 watts. 219. 214. We're staying right between 200 and 220 watts on the power draw from the wall on an i7 7700 with a GeForce GTX 1070. Pretty much hovering right there, right around 220. And that certainly explains, oh no, climbing a little bit, 227. It explains why the smaller power supply, that 385 watt, didn't create a problem for this user. And this power consumption may spike a little later in the test. So just keeping an eye on it here. Still hovering between 200 and 220 for the most part. It's bouncing around quite a bit in that range. Yeah. 218, 224, 217, 209, 221, 218, 221, 214, 208, 211, 216. Yeah, we're pretty much hovering right in the low 200s of watts being drawn from the wall. Computer is quiet. You'll see the CPU is not getting anywhere near any issue of heat problem. The fan is not ramping up. This graphics card has one fan on it, and it appears to be running. Still drawing, well, let's see, it's at 198 watts out of the wall right now during this part of the test. Jumping up now to 209, 214. back down to 175, up to 212. $194, 179, 185, 192, 195, 200, 113. Wow, it dropped. 210, 212. Pretty consistent here. Still at 210. $170, 209, 205, 198. Yeah, we're just bouncing around those low 200s still. 208, 205, 178, 214, 215, 210, 212, 214, 206, 198, 213, 211, 212, 217, 219, 214. Yeah, so you're getting the idea of this, right? And there's the test completed. Still pulling right now right around 210 watts out of the wall on average. And there's your performance results right there of the GTX 1070 with whatever version driver he's got on there, which I know is not the latest, because they've come out with drivers 2 or 3 times just in the time I've had the machine here. So you'll see people make a big deal out of nothing. Ultimately, it's nothing that really matters. And, you know, here I'm looking at 177.2 average frames per second. It's a pretty decent score. High quality, 1920 by 1080 full screen DirectX, I'm sorry, Direct 3D 11. So anyway, there you have it. Use common sense. All this overkill, that's all everybody talks about on the internet, is how can I go beyond anything that's realistic or expected and spend more money than I have to so that I could have the best? As though that's going to improve your ability as a player. It's not. All it does, theoretically, is you spend more money and let me shut that down. And you're more likely to have problems and you're complicating your build. For what reason? So I can impress people I don't know. Okay. So if you walk into investment firm Berkshire Hathaway, walk into any of their offices that hire tens of thousands of people around the globe, and then let them know what you think of their computers, see if they care. And then we'll see whose bank account's bigger and who's more successful. That's why I find the whole thing humorous, because you were driving at defining what actually matters. Forget your personal feelings. What actually matters? What makes a real difference in the real world beyond your feelings? And feelings are one of those things that technology is not really good at addressing. And how are you going to feel when somebody with a far lesser system than all the effort and money you spent on yours beats your behind in whatever game it is that you play? Well, at least your rig looks good. John Stellick has contributed $5. Says, are you driving a 1080p monitor during the test, or are you just outputting to the stream? I don't understand that question. The output was 1080, as you saw in the test results. You wouldn't run it to a monitor if you're running it into a capture card. And the capture card is a 1080 capture card, so It's the same as having it hooked up to a 1080 monitor. I'm not exactly sure where you're going with your question. But again, I think we're running into people that are asking questions that don't matter. You're getting into such minutia that it is in my opinion, a poor investment of time for the return of investment that you're putting in over information that you glean, which is ultimately negligible in the real world to human beings. But that's my opinion. I do appreciate your support, and I appreciate your asking a question. I just don't think that question matters. Now, if we're talking about the difference between 4K and 1080, that's a different story. Or if we're talking about 1080i versus 1080p, again, we're talking about real world scenario. And really, all that matters is how you configure your rig for your monitor, not how I configure mine. Your Music Sucks has contributed $5 and says, oh no, don't hurt my feels. It's not about hurting feelings. It's about, when I say feelings, I'm talking about what makes you feel good, what makes you feel rewarded, what makes you feel a sense of accomplishment. And if the things that you feel a sense of accomplishment for have no impact on the real world, I don't get it. Like, if I stop a leak in my house, I feel good because I've prevented damage, or I've prevented the damage from getting worse. I didn't have to call somebody and have them do it for me. I did it myself. If I paint my car and spend the money and the time to do that with no intention of selling it, and the paint job costs as much as the car is worth, I'm not really sure that makes any sense. Use that money to buy a nicer car. Use it as a down payment. Don't put lipstick on a pig, right? If I put hubcaps on my lawnmower, I think that's a waste of money that makes no difference in the real world. That's my perspective. Carl Wilson says, if you hit a wall at 250 miles an hour, or you hit the same wall at 300 miles an hour, it feels exactly the same. I'll take your word on that. It's a good example, though. Viable Solution says, hello from Ireland. Jimmy Bateman says, my video card with 3 fans is about 317 millimeters. Yeah, well, that won't fit in here. That for sure will not fit in there. John Feiner says, it may be a waste of energy and effort, but folks have their passions. So do I. My passion is common sense and making a difference in the real world. That's my passion. And to hopefully get people to have that consideration, not to change their mind, but hopefully to have them consider, before spending the money and the effort, if that money and effort could not be better invested into something that would make a more, what's the word I want? Realistic results. You know, that impacts more than just how you feel, but it actually impacts reliability or performance in some way. I'm just looking through comments, a lot of discussion of EVE Online. Never played it. Carey, do you ever get jealous that you can't keep some of these machines for yourself? Well, of course I do. But I have a lot of machines here, far more than I can use. And part of my problem is putting them to work or selling them and parting with them so I can make room for new ones. That's part of what comes with the job. Sometimes I put so much of my heart and soul into a build, I feel like it's my child, and I'm letting it, like, it's a very fast time for it to be grown up and move out. It all happens within a matter of days in most cases. I'm like, fly and be free, the world is yours. It gets shipped off to the customer, who hopefully has a great experience with it for many, many years and doesn't let them down. Or me, as the proud parent, becomes less proud. But I'm happy and I'm proud to say that the vast majority of machines that I send out are appreciated for many years. I say at least 8 years. Not at least, it's an average of about 8 years for residential users. And I try and get my business customers to change out every 3 to 5 years, depending on what the technology was at the time. So for an example, when SATA 1 came out, within 3 years, SATA 3 was out. And so it made those SATA 1 boards seem really slow. And after SATA 3 came out, and we're looking at like the Z87 chipset, or just the 87 chipset from Intel, then suddenly M.2 got introduced in the Z97, I want to say, but it was just Gen 1. And so within a couple of years, the NVMe standard with Gen 2, PCI Express 3x4 was the standard. It's been the standard for a number of years. So depending on where the customer buys the machine in the development of the technology, determines if I recommend its replacement in 3 years or in 5 years. Obviously, if I have any Z97s out there, they're way old. And I don't think I've got any businesses running Z97s. Pretty sure I don't. Ryan Farmer has contributed $5. Thank you, Ryan. Thanks for your support. Winston Anglu, good to see you, Winston. Winston's contributed $1 Canadian. Winston joins us from Vancouver. John Mallory says, I have a simple i9 9900K and I play online games, and no, it doesn't make me a better player. I mean, yeah. It's sort of like buying marble chess pieces. You're just not going to be a better chess player with an RGB chessboard and marble chess pieces. But if it makes you feel good, I don't know. I just think there's, for me and my personality, what makes me feel even better is making a difference in the real world. Making a difference, instead of making a difference to how I feel inside, which has no impact at all of the world around me, I'd rather make a difference that does make it have an impact on the world around me, which then makes me feel good inside. So I'm sort of the other way. You know, I kind of face it from a different direction. Chester Hughes has contributed $2. Again, thank you, Chester. Thanks for your support. Ryan Farmer says it was British pounds. Oh, my apologies, Ryan. So $5.50. I'm getting into buying a used machine and then upgrading them and selling them. Do you think it would be better to just start from scratch? I mean, it would depend on what are you getting used, how much are you paying for it, how much do you have to invest in it, how much time do you have, what's your profit margin going to be between the two systems, and how much time is got to be invested between the two. And because used systems are going to constantly vary in what you get, and of course the price of new systems is always varying, well, that could be yes to either answer depending on the resolution of those variables, you know. Don't know. You know, for all I know, there could be a system somebody's selling for $200 that you can't build for $1,000. But what I often see are people selling used systems far more than they're worth. If I go on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist, I see systems that are advertised as gaming machines with AMD FX processors in them and, you know, 4 or 5 generation-year-old graphics cards, and they want $500, $600 for them. And they're not even pristine. You know, they're clearly used. The cases are marked up a bit. In some cases, people can't even be bothered to wipe the dust off of them. And it'll say, oh, this will play all the latest games at 1080 or whatever. Okay. You know, they're either taking advantage of people who don't know, or they don't know themselves and they honestly believe what they're writing is true. In either case, everything I've seen used online has been a ripoff. And I get angry when I see them. Like, you're asking that much money for that old thing that should go in the dump. But if somebody wants to buy it, good luck. Ronaldo Torres says, "What's up, Uncle Carey?" Hey, Ronaldo, good to see you. So what I've got to do left here, again, back to where I was yesterday with doing a little cable management on the power supply. I now have the answers with regards to power consumption when the machine's running, a game at 1080, which is a third of the power delivery of this power supply. So we're drawing 210, 220 watts. This is a 650 watt power supply. And it's 80 plus bronze. I believe it's bronze, but it's 80 plus regardless, which means it's going to cost less money to run. It's just a better quality power supply than what came stock in this Aurora R6, which is this Dell branded, let's see if I can read it. How many watts is it? I keep forgetting. 385. So that's the power supply that was in there. And if this has an 80 plus efficiency rating, it doesn't say so. But you do have a little green light and a little push button back here for something. I don't know what that does. Reset? I don't know. Weird. Not standard. And I still need to determine if I have one of those little power adapters for the optical drive, because that's going to require that really small SATA power connector. Now, in theory, I could cut the wires and splice them. That's kind of a hack job. As a professional, I like to make sure the job is done in a way that makes it serviceable by other techs or even the owner if they choose to in the future, which means you use adapters. You plug things in that can be unplugged. Back in the day, I remember installing a car stereo and saying, I don't need to spend the $12 for the manufacturer plug adapter. I can just cut the adapter off and put all the wires on individually. The problem with that logic is remembering 3 years later when you need to change the radio out, what was the left speaker positive and right speaker negative, and what was the antenna, and what was the... But if you leave the adapter on and you spend the $12 for the adapter, in this case for the car, it means anybody working on that in the future can just click and unclick and go right back and get on with life. It's less messy, less prone to having a problem with a wire coming loose, and certainly less confusion with regards to which wire goes where, because that's all handled in the adapter. Carey, do you recommend the NZXT Nuka-Cola cases? Yeah, I built 4 of them and couldn't buy them after that. So I don't even know if you can even find one for sale. I like it a lot. Yeah, I really like that Nuka-Cola case a lot. Can motherboard binning affect overclock on the same chip? Yeah, absolutely. Carey, it gets down to labeling those cables. Well, if you've got a car and you've labeled all those little cables, the labels dry up and break off. Just, especially in Arizona when the car's sitting half the year in very hot temperatures. But it's going to happen no matter what. Those labels are just going to fade. The stickiness of them, they get brittle, they start to break off, and then you're just left with sort of a mess in there. You got to get a vacuum cleaner and clean out a little labels up off the inside of the dash. Sellers on eBay asking almost $1,000 for a Nuka-Cola case. I'm sure if I got a good enough offer, I'd sell mine, but mine's a fully built system that matches more or less the system I did for the gentleman in Australia. They say the like count is looking kind of low. So what they're talking about, when you're watching a video and you like it, if you like it, you can click a little thumbs up button. And where did my thumbs up button go? Come back here, thumbs up. No, that's me, that's not thumbs up. See, what happened was I had this in 4K mode. And so I have to resize the window. First I have to find the window. Where did my window go? Let's try that. I think that's the window right there. Is that it? Nope, that's not it. Which one am I moving? Let's try it now. There it is. That's all I wanted to do. All right, so all I was trying to say is if you like a video, down below the video there's a little thumbs up and there's a thumbs down, and you can click those to let a content creator know if you like that kind of content and you want to see more of it, or if you don't like it, you'd like to see less of that kind of content. Doesn't really do anything financially for the content creator. They don't make any more money. I suppose if you had sponsors, your sponsors probably want to see a lot of likes. I don't have any sponsors. You guys are the sponsors. So this channel survives by the contributions of the community and the generosity of folks. It is my goal to try and keep it that way, with a few exceptions. There are a couple of companies I would accept as sponsors. I'm working a bit on that on the background. I just don't have a lot of time to pursue it. And I also like that it enables me to speak freely without any word or concern of financial retribution. If people decide they want to team up and boycott against me for some reason, there's no sponsor to go after to try and pressure me. So those people are basically, you know, harmless. There's been some attempts by people who think they have more power than they have in reality, and they've all been shown just how powerless they are on my channel. Because I have that freedom, they are completely powerless. It took them a while to get the hint, but they did get there, and at least most of them did. And when you go to sponsors and when you go to ways that people can attack you, they just decide I'm going to attack you. One of the ways they can do that is through threatening sponsors, and then sponsors can back out, and then you have to wonder if you're financially able to continue. So with what I'm doing, it doesn't involve a lot of money, and it gives me a lot more control, and it makes those people who think, you know, like they only see the world one way, they think everything is controlled by them or that they can manipulate it. They can't manipulate here. So that's one of the reasons why. So there are some benefits to having the community support it, and there's far more of you who support the channel, far, far more than those who are against it. But anytime you're out trying to help somebody, or anytime you're gaining in popularity, it doesn't matter what you do, you will be attacked if you're on the internet. That's just the culture of the society that we live in today. But thankfully we have the block button, and we have the ability to, for people that are threatening, we have the ability to trace them, track them down, and get them the help that they need. So, like I said, if and when I take on any sponsors, there's only a handful I would accept. And, you know, I don't want this to become a less sincere channel. You know, I like it to be authentic and genuine. And as long as I can control the sponsors that I have, and that they're sponsors I truly believe in, it's a win-win for everybody. But you start going for that money, and that's all you're looking at is the money, and before you know it, I'm doing ads for, you know, razor blades. That ain't right. Not for me, it isn't. So what I've got to do after I do the cable management, I'm very satisfied with the thermal compound, and the way the system's running is great. I've got this Elgato HD60 Pro video capture card here, and that can go into any of the available slots, of which we have 2, and one of them's right up against the bottom of the card, so I'll probably go to the bottom slot just to give it a little breathing room, even though bandwidth between that first slot and that last one may be shared. I think it'll be okay. I think it's going to be fine. Because this is just, you know, it's got the PCI by, is it 4 connector? And then it'll fit into the bigger connector, no problem. So you, even though it's got that small little connector down there, it can fit into that big slot. It doesn't work the other way around, obviously, but that's the benefit of PCI Express. And then I think after that, ship it off. You are already doing ads for Coca-Cola? I need to drink something when I'm online for 2 hours and 30 minutes. Let me see you do it for 2 hours and 30 minutes and not take a drink. It's not an intentional ad for Coca-Cola. I assure you I'm paying them. And for all I know, they may not be happy their product's on display here. You'll often see in television shows that they block out the brand of a car, or you know, posters on the wall, or even sometimes t-shirts or hats. They'll blur it out, strictly to avoid any potential litigation. You're going, hey, I'm giving you free advertising. The company's like, we didn't ask, and we don't want to be a part of your program. We don't like what your program does, and we don't want to be associated with it. Take us off. So that's the potential harm. On the other hand, if I got Coca-Cola's attention at all, I'd be happy for it. So, you know, be careful what you wish for. Might just be exactly what you wanted. I would say if people didn't abuse the Facebook fan page, then Carey should totally make his own Discord server. Yeah, we tried that. It got shut down in a record time. I don't think the Discord server was up 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It was shut down. Like the abuse on Facebook didn't even hold a candle to the abuse on Discord. People, there's some weird cultural phenomenon that did not exist in the 80s that's happening now, where everybody thinks it's important to be smarter, to prove that they're smarter or better than some stranger or bot that they're speaking to on the internet, and in creating fights or threats. It's very unevolved. It's very primal and barbaric. And the human race may be just a big portion of the human race may be not quite ready for the internet yet. So because of the people who ruin it for others, it doesn't exist. If we do a paid platform, like somebody, like a club you have to join, then we get rid of all that riffraff and we can all just be like-minded, kind individuals. But I can't think of any other way to eliminate the riffraff other than to charge for it. Because the one thing the riffraff don't have is money. None of them have money. I think they don't have jobs. This is just a form of entertainment for them. So I'm pretty certain my theory on this is dead on. It doesn't seem fair to everybody else to charge them, but there's no other way to isolate the riffraff from the sincere. James Bovey has just contributed $20. Thank you, James. If I had all the money I spent on Coca-Cola, I probably could have bought a Rolls Royce. That's a lot of Coca-Cola. I don't know. Maintenance on that Rolls Royce might be more than what you spent on Coca. You might be underestimating the value of a Rolls Royce and the expense of maintaining it. James says, Carey, I love your videos. You saved me about $100 in aggravation and mistakes when I built my computer 3 years ago using your Intel Skylake video, so I figure I'm still ahead. Right on, James. Well, thanks for sharing the love. I really appreciate it. Like I said, the channel is supported by the community. And Sharon says I should start a subscription service. Getting that all configured and getting the foundation for the ability to collect payment it requires a financial investment that I don't have, as well as a time investment that I don't have. So I'm just not there yet. YouTube is also starting to offer some subscription service, but it's not quite where I need it to be, last I checked. But that may be in the future. You know, it may be a situation where live content is released to paid subscribers, and then non-paid people that subscribe to the traditional YouTube channel can see that pre-recorded live content at some point after it airs, a couple days, a week, I don't know. That way you keep everybody happy, and you end up with a chat room of people that have paid, and those people are less likely to be troublemakers or, you know, people that are looking, you know, out of boredom to just mock people and get a rise out of people because they find entertainment in that. And then that would just leave them the comment section. And for those videos, I could even just turn the comments off and just leave that area for subscribers only. Really want to encourage and incentivize good behavior. Give people a reason, since they don't seem to have one, some people, to choose how they want to behave. And I think as long as they're punished for bad behavior and rewarded for good behavior, it's something that will just happen intrinsically in time. Winston Angloose contributed again, $2 Canadian. He says, Canadian cool dude. Switch to Twitch, Carey, for live. No, Twitch is, Twitch would like me to work 147 hours a week to make $10 a day. Not really interested in that platform. I tried it. In fact, I had a conversation with a Twitch representative about it. I don't think he liked because I'm pretty direct, and I told him exactly, you know, what the costs were involved, and, you know, he was encouraging me to try it again, and I said, okay, well, what about all the money I already spent? What about all of the money you made for me that you've not shown me one dime? Well, you just got to keep at it. Well, you know, there's a certain point where you've got to cut your losses. There's a certain point, if you want to stay in business, that you go, I can't go down this path anymore. Yeah, it might lead somewhere eventually, but I don't have enough gas to get me there. And if you're not providing me any gas, and all you're encouraging me is to go, and you're profiting off of it, well, of course you're going to. If you're profiting off of my work and I'm not even profiting of it, how stupid do you think I am? Was more or less what I asked the guy. Explain to me how my motivation is being encouraged, knowing that you've made money off of me and not giving me a dime, and are hanging a carrot in front of me. You're breadcrumbing me to convince me to work harder for the promise of a payday on Tuesday, some Tuesday in the future, not this Tuesday. But if you keep going, and if, then what could be, I'm done with the ifs and the coulds, because that's all Twitch is, ifs and coulds. Twitch doesn't want educational videos, they just want gamers. I asked him that directly. I said, you know, you're a gaming platform, I'm building machines. How many of your viewers do you think, out of 100% of viewers, how many average Twitch viewers do you think would be interested in the type of content that I produce? And he said, 20, 25%. I go, that's not good enough. That right there is not good enough. Well, do you know how many users you have? I know how many users you have. And if I can't get 100%, if I can't get 80%, I'm not interested. It's not the right platform. And I told the guy, I was very, very explicit. I understand you're making money from me. It totally makes sense that you want me to make more content for Twitch while not paying me. I get it. But do you get that I get that? You know, what are you doing to invest in me besides saying, go get him, Tiger? What are you doing? Show me the money. Invest in me. Give me some advance that I can work off. Give me something other than a phone call. Nope. Okay, well, listen, kudos to you for trying to get me to work for free. I don't blame you for trying. I mean, if anybody's dumb enough to do that, why shouldn't you profit off of it? I don't really think he liked the conversation, but you can't say I wasn't honest. And that's why I'm not on Twitch anymore. I mean, I still have the account, but it's more or less dormant. I've kept trying different things over time, trying and trying and trying, even built an entire system dedicated to Twitch streaming. That's, $1,500 investment. Paid more for bandwidth to do it. And through over a year of experimenting with Twitch, Twitch has paid me $0.00. And they kept moving the bar, by the way. They said, here's what you need to become a partner on Twitch. And then they'd say, well, now here's what you need. Oh, now we've changed it. Now here's what you need. And every time they want more and more and more, and you've never given me a penny, not once. There's plenty of money they made off of my videos. I know that for a fact. Ads were running on my videos, but I never saw any revenue from it. Not a penny. So Twitch is a little bit of a sore topic with me. But if you're gaming and you're just having a good time and you want to stream it out at the same time, and a check comes in because you do it a lot, then Twitch makes sense for that. But it doesn't make sense for what I do. Brock Dog says, thanks so much, Carey, for your Windows 10 optimizer. I use it all the time whenever I'm cleaning a friend or family member's PC. Not only that, but you've been a huge influence to me. Right on, Brock Dog. Thank you. I'm glad to hear that. Those kind of messages make my day. They do. What about Floatplane? So yeah, Floatplane hasn't really gone anywhere, has it? It's been, what, 5 years? Most people have never heard of it, don't know what it is, and the name is not descriptive as to what it's supposed to be or what it was supposed to be, which it still is not. The people behind Floatplane have been less than kind or courteous to me over the years, so I would never be one to hold a grudge, but I would need some incentive to partner up with somebody knowing that they would be making money from me. We'd have to sort of make amends from both ends. And I don't believe the people behind Floatplane have any desire to do that. So given its current status and its stalling, the fact that it hasn't gone anywhere, and you combine that with the way I've been treated over the last few years by the people behind that, I don't hold out a lot of hope for that platform for me for that reason. Now, if people show an open mind and they want to work together and they extend a hand, I will extend a hand back. But I won't continue to be disrespected or ignored so I can make some money. That doesn't work for me. What about Vimeo? Yeah, Vimeo, again, a little too specialist. I don't really think people are going there to look for videos like mine. That's Jimmy. Are you a cow? You sound like a cow. Carey, do you have a Patreon? I tried Patreon, it didn't work for me. That was many years ago, and I never closed the account, but it's been abandoned for a long time. Viable Solutions says, thanks to you, I'm building my 2080 Ti i9900K rig for editing. Right on. Yeah, well, that should be tomorrow's build. I hope. David Martinez says, I like your shirt, Carey. Well, thank you, David. What about the idea of creating a website for your work and stream and collect 100%? I need about $35,000 for the server, the programming, the backend, the money collection, the email system, and then the bandwidth required. It's about 35. Well, the first quote I got was 70,000 to get started. It's going to take too long to generate that kind of investment back, to return that investment back. There's probably somebody who would do it very cheap, which then could open me up to issues with security and passwords getting out and things like that because it's not being done right. So it's a very big process, of developing the site, paying for the bandwidth, being able to collect the payments, keep track of who has access, who doesn't. Yeah, the original quote was 70 grand. I'm saying 35 because I honestly think I could do it at 35. William Lynn says, HP or Acer laptop? Well, that's real easy. If it's got HP on it, I don't want it. So HP or anything, I'll take anything other than HP. But when I buy a laptop, I buy Dell. Have I ever heard of Storyfire? No, I have not. And that's not a platform I'll be going to if I've never heard of it. You should write an ebook. No. So when you write a book, it took me 9 months to write the book I already wrote. And then you have an issue of making people aware that it exists to sell it. And then you have an issue of piracy and theft. It requires editors. It requires time. It comes down to time. Who's going to get the ISBN number assigned? Who's going to get it formatted for Kindle? Who's going to get it formatted, in EPUB and Mobi? And is it going to be available published on demand? And who's going to do the cover art? Yeah, it's pretty expensive and time consuming to write a book. So by doing video, it's much faster. I do it live, I crank it out, it's done. With a book, I'm a perfectionist. I'll look at a paragraph and I'll just keep editing that same paragraph over and over, move this sentence, copy, paste over here, over there. 9 months to write a 300-page book. I didn't even think it was 300 pages. And it's obsolete and worthless now. So yeah, I don't have the patience for it. And not only that, I can't afford to have the patience for that. Now, some people are natural writers. A guy like Stephen King, I imagine, can crank out novels like, 7 novels in the time it took me to write one how-to book. But I'm not Stephen King, just in case there was any confusion. If NVIDIA started making CPUs, would you buy one? I would love to see how they would perform in time. Remember, there's a lot more to a CPU and how it performs than just the chip itself, but the chipset and the motherboard that's designed around it. And the compatibility and performance and how it would work in a business environment would be very important. So I wouldn't jump to anything brand new and make my customers guinea pigs. Absolutely not. Most of my business customers have no interest in anything but Intel. They just don't care. There's not enough money savings to deal with unknowns, and they would rather stick with what they know. And I'm happy to provide a customer with whatever they want. So if NVIDIA came out with a CPU and one of you guys wanted me to build a system with it, if that's what you're paying for, I'm happy to build it. Would I recommend it? It would have to be out for at least a year so we could get a gauge on how reliable is it, how fast is it, what are the idiosyncrasies or security risks or heat issues or incompatibility possibilities that exist with that new entry to the market. Intel's platform, they just keep building on the same platform. So we've got a very mature technology both in the chipset and on the CPU. And that makes businesses very, very happy. If a business saves a little bit of money on the computer, but it ends up costing them productivity from the employee, then they didn't save money at all. They did the opposite. It cost them money. And if you have an unknown, most businesses don't want to risk it. Yes, there could be a benefit going to somebody else other than Intel, but we know what to expect from Intel, we know what we're going to pay, and we're okay with it. And so that tends to be the mindset of business. Let's stick with what we know. Let's get back to work. On the consumer side of things, consumers are a bit more courageous and have less risk than a business does. So when a platform's been out long enough to mature and to establish a foundation of expectation, reasonable expectation, with regards to reliability, compatibility, all of that, and that includes the chipset and the motherboard, then I can start recommending it. But even recommending AMD CPUs, when I have to my business clients, it has been universally shut down. Like, hey, you know, we want to try this. It could save you a little bit of money. It's something a little different. They're like, nope. La 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 la. This is what I want. Everything you've built for us over the last however many years it's been has always run great, and we want to keep doing what you've always been doing because that's what we love about you. That's what we love about the product we buy from you, and we want more of that. And I go, but it's possible that you could get a better value. There, nope, nope, nope. Because isn't it also possible we'll have problems? Yeah, but I mean, it's possible you could have problems with the other, the Intel platform too. Well, we never have. We've never had problems with the Intel platform, so we have no reason to want to leave them. There's no motivation for us to change. We like everything the way it's working. We want more of that. That's generally the message you get from business. You see, in business, when people take risks and those risks don't pay off, they lose their jobs. One of the reasons SpaceX is able to do all the things NASA can't do is NASA, if you work like at a government agency, you don't want to take risks. You will lose your job if that risk fails. SpaceX, it's all about risk, because the more risk you take, the greater the reward can be. And if you fail, it's not the end of your job. It just means you go back to the drawing board and fix whatever the problem is and become more innovative. So that private sector creates that innovation that's required to be in demand in the marketplace. NASA never landed a rocket. They didn't have a reusable, they had the space shuttle, but they didn't have a reusable rocket. Well, I suppose that centerpiece, no, the centerpiece burned up. The boosters, those they recovered and reused the boosters. But even then they were parachuting down. So there's this mentality in business and in government, which is if you try to do something different and you fail, you will probably be out of a job. And so that mentality then trickles down. You say, well, you want to try this other CPU manufacturer, and that person says yes, and then there's some sort of a problem beyond anybody's control. You're waiting on a BIOS update to address it, or is it worth losing your job over? Do you like that other company so much that you're willing to lose your job over it? And universally the answer is no. No. As much as somebody might like AMD at home, they know better than to recommend it in the workplace. If it means that if there's an incompatibility or reliability issue that affects productivity, they could be out of a job. What's in it for them? You know what I mean? Like, if what you're telling me is, if I save the company money by going with a cheaper chip that ends up being just fine, I am not rewarded for it. But if it ends up not being fine, I can lose my job. Or if I stick to buy what we've always bought, then I don't risk anything at all, and my reward is exactly the same. What decision would you make? And that's where the politics and the bureaucracy kind of come into it in the business world. And it doesn't make one necessarily better than the other. It's an established foundation that's earned in trust over time. And that's why AMD won't just overnight take over Intel. It just won't happen like that. It's something that has to gradually erode away Intel. If Intel makes bumbling errors that cause businesses downtime, that may push them over to AMD's side. But it's not enough for AMD to just come out with a cheaper chip. They've got to have better control over the chipset drivers, and they need to prove over time that they can withstand and surpass the reliability and performance, the cost of not only the acquisition of the chip and the motherboard and to create this, but of the ongoing maintenance cost, the cost of ownership, including the power cost, including maintenance cost. When you're talking about a business that's buying 10, 15, 20,000 computers, power consumption can make a huge difference in your electric bill. So all of this has to be measured by companies when they invest in anything. And so sticking with what you've already invested in, where you've already established the answers to those questions, is faster and safer to make that decision than to experiment with somebody else under the guise that there's an immediate savings up front, but it might cost you on the back end, and it might cost you personally in your career for making that decision. That's what happens in the real world. And it's right or wrong, that's just reality. Christoph Esch has contributed €5, and he said, on that note, nobody got fired for buying IBM. Where have I heard that before? That's a famous quote from somebody. Real Name has contributed $5 and said, hey, Carey, I just want to say thank you for sharing all that you know. I've learned a lot from you, and you're a great teacher. Right on, Real Name. I appreciate that. I am just trying to keep it real here. Does Intel still make motherboards? As far as I know, Intel stopped making motherboards when I worked for them. But they still make like the Nook and stuff like that. So it's kind of a trick question, I think. In general, no, you can't go to like Newegg and look up an Intel manufactured motherboard. You used to be able to in the mid-90s, early 90s, 80s. There were Intel boards. I'm trying to think what the last Intel board was. I want to say it was in the 90s. Nicholas says the memory problems that the AMD Zen had at launch have disappeared, and the third Ryzen Zen memory scaling is now faster. Memory speed doesn't really make much difference in real-world use. It might if you're using onboard video. And again, there's still some chipset and some driver issues outside of it. There's so much focus on the CPU. It's sort of like focusing on the car and not paying attention to the tires. You put some 7-year-old tires on a brand new Ferrari and then try and do 130, 140 miles an hour on it and see how long you live. It has nothing to do with the quality of the car. I'm afraid people aren't seeing past their nose. It's weird. There's more to the chip. The motherboard plays in a very important role. And I'm afraid the AMD motherboards just aren't. They're just missing a piece. You know, the driver updates are one thing, you know, no automatic driver updates, which bothers me. The other issue with AMD is they're still worse in gaming. Universally, they're just worse in gaming. If you're actually trying to get productivity done, and this is the irony, the Ryzen 3 CPU, the best of the Ryzen 3, to the equivalent Intel CPU, spanks it when it comes to actually getting work done. But Intel spanks the AMD when it comes to playing games. And yet, businesses, they want to go with the Intel because that's what they know and trust. Now that is completely backwards. It's just not as simple as saying one chip is better than the other. It depends on how you use it and what's important to you and how much liability you take. Like I said, if you're responsible for ordering 20,000 machines for Ford Motor Company, and those machines turn out to have a major issue, you're probably not going to keep your job anymore. And your attitude towards AMD may change, or it could be anybody. It doesn't have to be AMD. We're just talking about AMD. So AMD just needs to prove themselves in time. Nothing you can say is going to make a wound heal any faster. You know, if you have a wound, you can talk about it all day long. It won't change the reality that that wound isn't going to heal until it's healed. No matter what you say, no matter what you believe, and no matter how much faith you have, it has no impact on the reality that it just is going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. And I have no problem with AMD. I build AMDs, the streaming computers in AMD. My personal preference, having used the AMD and the Threadripper, which was a complete $4,400 experiment, was a bad investment. You don't see it. You don't see it because it frustrates me. It's loud. It was crashing all the time. I had to turn off XMP in the memory profile to get it to stop crashing, despite the memory claiming to be compatible with AMD, despite BIOS updates. Finding a cooler to fit the Threadripper was a pain in the butt. None of the coolers, in my opinion, are good. The system's too loud and it's too finicky. But I would say the same thing of the equivalent X99 or X299, which is, kind of what Threadripper's up against. Gaming with a Threadripper is sort of like taking the kids to school in an urban environment in a Land Rover 4x4 or Humvee or something. It's way overkill, very impractical. And my thoughts on the Threadripper are to pull the motherboard and chip out of it and to stop trying to make it work for me and replace it with a socket 1151 Intel Z390 chipset, slap something in there with a nice quiet cooler like the Mugen 5, because the case is great, the storage is great, the power supply is great, everything about the system is great other than that Threadripper chip and motherboard. They're too finicky. And again, same with the X99 and X299 Intel side. It's just too finicky. Everything's very intolerant. So I can't rely on it. When I was using it for streaming, it was cutting my streams off midstream. What choice did I have? And then I pursued chasing after several different coolers, trying to get that noise level down, finding ones that'll fit, then dealing with how loud they became, and then dealing with the crashing. And it was like, all this money for a headache. I could have bought 3 Intel systems that would have been far more power than that single Threadripper for the same amount of money. Far more power combined than what that single Threadripper did for the same amount of money. I am determined to do something with it, but I think the answer for my needs, not your needs, for my needs, is to pull the Threadripper out of it with the motherboard. I can still use the same RAM. I can't use that cooler, so the cooler's got to go. So the cooler, the motherboard, and the CPU, I'm going to yank them. And I don't know what I'll do with them. Maybe somebody will want to buy them. And then I'll just, because I have a good case, like I say, good power supply, good storage, I'll pull there's 3 500 gig Samsung 960s on there in a RAID 0, which is just pointless and stupid. It looks good on benchmarks, but the reality is, when you have a bad update and then your Windows won't load, good luck getting a Windows rescue disk to work, because you don't have the RAID drivers on it, and you have to invest time to research that, find them, inject them into a Windows rescue disk, make your own manually so that you can boot it so you can do your repair. For what? What's the benefit? What do I get out of that? Good benchmark numbers. Did it stream any better? It streamed worse. Was it quieter? It was louder. So what good does all those read speeds and benchmarks do me? It's not outputting higher quality video or more frame rates. My upload bandwidth is still the same as it was regardless. So think about it. How does it make sense? Just because you want to like it. That's not a good enough reason. I want to like the underdog. I want AMD to succeed. They're just not there, man. But we'll see. I don't know much about the 3000 series. It is a fairly new product. I do know that the 3900X outperforms, was it the 9900K? In productivity, which I wasn't expecting. So as an editor or a streamer, that should be preferred over Intel. As a gamer, you should prefer Intel. That's the information I have so far. Will you do a video on the rebuild? Absolutely. I won't do anything with the Threadripper off camera. I've promised that to the community. The community paid for it. The Threadripper belongs to the community. And the idea was to have the Threadripper on display, like in the background with all the RGB lights blinking and going, hey, that's the computer that's streaming right now. And then have everybody who contributed have their name on the front of it, which I did do. Unfortunately, it just didn't pan out that way. But that doesn't mean that I've given up. The system is sitting in my office, and once I, famous last words, once I get caught up, I've got a couple systems I've still got to get built this week. The Michigan trip in September, I hope many of you will come out and see me. I'll be at TechCon Unplugged, which is, the link for that is in the video notes below this video, or just go to Google and type in TechCon Unplugged and it'll take you right to the site. Even just techconunplugged.com, I think will take you right there if you want to join us. It's really designed for computer business owners looking for making connections and taking some, they have some panels from others who are there to advise you on how to grow your business, as well as vendors and people that can sell you product. Some of the vendors are just too big to want to deal with, a little old self-employed guy. But there are vendors out there that will, and this is a great place to make those connections and make new like-minded friends. It's one thing to meet people online. It's another thing to meet them face to face. There's a chemistry that you just can't establish online that you can when you're face to face. Never cheap out on your motherboard. Yeah, well, don't cheap out on anything. Don't cheap out on your storage. Don't cheap out on your power supply. Certainly don't cheap out on your keyboard or your mouse or your monitor, because those are the things that convey information to you from you, right? Don't cheap out on your case, because then, that'll come back to bite you later. But you don't have to buy the most expensive thing. Just avoid buying the cheapest thing, unless it's a moderately priced thing that happens to be on sale. Well, that's good. But I noticed a lot of the AMD 3000 tests that were being done online are being done with the most expensive motherboard available. Is that fair? Do they do that with Intel? When they test the Intel chip, do they buy the most expensive motherboard possible and then test it? But remember, the chip is only as good as the board you're plugging it into. And on all the AMD 3000 reviews I've seen, they've been using the most expensive, I think it was an MSI board. I think it was a $300 or $285 motherboard. I've never spent that much money for a socket 1151, I think the most I spent was $225, and I think that was also MSI. And that was one time. Do a live tech vets from TechCon. Mike and I looked into that, and unfortunately, we looked into it too late. TechCon is all booked up with regards to speakers and events. So, and Mike will be out there. Mike Smith from the Mike Tech Show has got his plane ticket. He'll come out from Philadelphia, join me in Grand Rapids. I'm not doing any work there. I will not be there to work. I will not be doing any panels. I will be buying a ticket like everybody else, and I will be an attendee like everybody else. I will be a part of the meet and greet in as much as whatever that matters. There's plenty of other people to meet and greet there, such as Matthew Rodella from the Computer Business podcast. There's Jeff Hallish and Paco LeBron, who are putting the event on, who do the Podnuts podcast. There will be Mike Smith from Mike Tech Show. There will be, gosh, so many people are going to be there. I feel bad when I forget people's names. But go to TechCon Unplugged, look at the list of attendees that are scheduled to speak, and then you might also just ask around in the community to see if anybody that you know online is going. I hope to see a lot of you out there. I think it's going to be a great time to be in Michigan during that time of year. And it's my home. It's where I'm from. It's my home state. And it could be raining and snowing, and I'd still think it was great. It's just, I'm a little biased when it comes to that. John Rogers says some of the motherboards they used for the testing and the reviews were over $600. Yeah, when I look at like the early reviews specifically, like AMD goes, we like you, so we're going to send you the 3900X and a board so you can test it. They really controlled that test. AMD, you know, realistically, what's an end user going to buy? Now, it really doesn't make any sense to me to buy the most expensive chip and then pair it with the cheapest motherboard. That doesn't make any sense either. But it also doesn't necessarily make sense that AMD's chip costs more than Intel's equivalent. AMD is supposed to be cheaper. I think they're $11 more on the 3900X. But be that as it may, I'm not against AMD. I'm really not. I just have higher expectations. And I think AMD needs to stop comparing themselves about how close they are to Intel, and instead needs to distance themselves ahead of Intel. And that's when they deserve to be seriously looked at, when they start carving a path that Intel follows. But so long as they just keep throwing themselves up against Intel and saying, look at how good we are, we're as good as Intel. No, you've got to be better. And I don't mean better at some things. You need to be better at everything. You need to have a cheaper price, a faster processor. You need automated driver updates. And then we can start seriously considering them in the business arena. But that being said, those are my requirements. Those aren't universal requirements from everybody. That's just the take I have on it. The systems, I've got a couple AMD systems here. As I mentioned, the system I'm streaming to you on is an AMD 2700X. I've got a system in the back that's part of the build that Mitch and I started last October. That was a kind of a select your own adventure build where you could choose which part you wanted to see installed next. That got really complicated and people just weren't getting it when I put the trials out and the demos. So I've scaled it back, and now Mitch is in Thailand, so it'll be a while before he comes back and we can pick that project up. When that system's done, I don't know what'll happen with it. It's designed to be a mid-range gaming machine. It really was purchased just for the build video. Once the build video is done, I don't know what's going to happen to it. It'll be sold, I guess. So it won't be sold to a business. You know, it'll probably be sold to a viewer who wants to buy it. The businesses, like I say, they just don't want AMD systems. They don't want them. None of the businesses, let me rephrase, none of the businesses I work with. So I don't know how you change the mind of a business, but it's not for me to dictate to the business. It's for me to do what they ask me to do. And there's no feelings involved. And no differently, if you contacted me and you said, Carey, I'd like you to build me an AMD 3900X or a Threadripper system, I'll build it for you. Doesn't mean I recommend it, but I'll build it for you if that's what you want. That's my job. Carey, are you closer to having the software you were working on that makes PCs faster, ready for sale? I started working on it, and then, you know, the floors and everything has started happening, and I haven't picked it up in 2 months. I haven't looked at it. More or less forgotten about it. It has a lot of potential, but I just don't have a lot of time to invest right now. We'll see if that changes. And the longer I wait, you know, something else could come out that does it, and then I'll be too late. So we'll see what happens, but appreciate you asking about it. Have you ever been to the Upper Peninsula when you lived in Michigan? Yes. How are you liking the new floors? I love my new floors. I love them. Love them. Do I like the Brave browser? No, I just pretty much use Chrome because so much of what I do is streaming on YouTube. YouTube is owned by Google. Google makes Chrome. Everything works better together with Chrome. Chrome is a bit of a memory pig, and it's got its own problems, but everything's got problems. Firefox has problems. Opera has problems. Edge has problems. There's not a perfect browser. And again, it really doesn't matter what browser I use, does it? Does it? If YouTube worked better on Firefox, I'd be using Firefox. And if I could make a lot of money and get all kinds of business fixing Apple computers, I'd be doing that. So just kind of doing what I need to do, you know? There's not a whole lot of feelings involved in it. It's not like I like something better than something else. It's not really what it's about. It's about providing a service to your customers and helping guide your customers to the best solution that meets their needs. You got to take your feelings out of it. Take your personal feelings out of it. It has nothing to do with running a business. Am I going to stay there 30 days? No, I'll be there 2 weeks. But I've got a week's worth of driving. It's about 3 days drive from Phoenix to Detroit. Well, Grand Rapids is a little closer. But it's about 3 days to get there and about 3 days to get back. So if I'm there for 2 weeks and there's 3 days there, 3 days back, I'm pretty much gone for 3 weeks, nearly a month. And I've got a friend of mine who I might stop and see in Tennessee on the way home. And I might spend some time with him for a while. We'll see. And then I could be gone a month. But I will be broadcasting from there. And then I'll be in Miami for the Acronis Cyber Security Summit. And I'll be covering that on the YouTube channel live as much as possible for the 4 days. I'll be out 3 or 4 days in October. And then after that, I don't know. I've got some irons in the fire, but I don't want to say anything because I don't know. Maybe nothing. Go to Henry Ford Village in Michigan. You know, they don't call it that anymore. It used to be Greenfield Village, then Henry Ford. Now it's just called the Henry Ford. It was just there not too long ago, a couple of years ago. And I remember going there on a school trip when I was about 8 years old. For me, it's a place for kids. But the Rouge plant where they make the Ford F-150 was like right down the street. We did a tour of the factory, which was dead quiet. Like you expect an assembly line where they're building cars to be loud. It's very quiet, very peaceful, calm. You know, employees weren't running around. There weren't a bunch of employees. The manufacturing of cars has drastically changed from how I remember it growing up in the 70s. It was quite an eye-opener. Will a Ryzen 3000 really work on old motherboards? Well, I haven't tested any, but obviously you're not going to get the benefits, the full benefits of the 3000 series chip on a board that wasn't designed for it right out of the gate. So there's a difference between will something work and will something work optimally. So to me, it doesn't make sense to buy the latest and greatest chip and then put it on a motherboard that is also not the latest and greatest. But at the same time, I'm also not a fan of buying the most expensive of anything. But if you're going to get the latest and greatest chip, then I would at least get a mid-range latest and greatest board. I wouldn't get the cheap one, I wouldn't get the expensive one. I'd find one somewhere near the middle of that group, you know, as I typically do, Gigabyte, Asus, or even MSI or ASRock, I think would be okay. But I definitely wouldn't be looking for the cheapest board to pair with the most expensive chip. Nor would I be looking for the most expensive board to pair with the most expensive chip. Carey, you got to go back to Greenfield Village. It's like time travel. Yeah, it probably is. Yeah, but there's so many other things I want to do when I'm there. It's not like I'm going to go there and twiddle my thumbs going, what do I do today? If that were the case, I would totally do that. There's so many other things I really want to do, and there won't be enough time to do it all. So yeah, maybe when I live there eventually. Carey, I work for an MSP, and a while back you made a comment you shouldn't trust a tech that does everything. I don't think that's exactly what I said. I'm more or less a believer in being a specialist. And when you're a specialist, it means that there is an area or a niche that you excel at. So if somebody says they fix Linux and Mac and Windows computers, not equally, they don't. No. They're going to have their strengths in some areas and their weaknesses in others. No man is an island, is the expression. Jack of all trades, master of none. There's lots of expressions that have been around long before I've existed that warn people against somebody who claims to, be able to do everything. It doesn't mean they do everything equally well. So ideally, people find what their strengths are and they exploit them, not only for their own benefit, but for the benefit of their customers. And so if there is a shop that does Mac and Windows and Linux repairs, hopefully they're being done by different people. Hopefully you have a Windows specialist and a Linux specialist and a Mac specialist. And even within those specialists, they may not be equally good at certain flavors of Linux or different Mac products. There may be some Mac products they're better at than other Mac products. Just as a Windows expert may not be a Windows expert when it comes to Windows Server or Active Directory or that sort of stuff. That's a different skill set. So somebody goes, yeah, I do Active Directory and servers, and I do Mac, and I do Linux, and I do VoIP, and yeah, sure you do. I have no doubt you do. And I'm sure you meet the bare minimum requirements of getting the job done. I've never met anybody that I said, wow, I could learn a lot from that guy in 16 different areas of tech. Like I've met people who are really good at cabling. I'm like, wow, you're really good at that. But when it came to configuring anything, not so good. When it came to plugging the cables in and actually getting them configured, that was somebody else who did it really, really well. When it comes to security, there are people that do nothing but security. That's the kind of person I want to talk to, not somebody who's like, yeah, I do the security stuff on the side. No. I mean, the odds are against you that you're going to be top of the game when it's not something you dedicate yourself to full time. So I don't, I'm not good at like modding stuff. Back in the day, you had to cut your own case panel hole to get a plexiglass window to fit. And it's pretty rough when I did it. It's pretty rough. Things like construction, I'm not good at that. I'm just not good at it. But when it comes to electronics or mechanical things, braking, I have a pretty good knack for reverse engineering and being able to take something apart and put it back together again. That doesn't make me good at it, right? It means that if push comes to shove, let's say, for example, my house air conditioner dies and it's 115 degrees outside, and the soonest anybody can come out to look at it is 3 weeks from now, I'm going to be out there with my tools taking it apart, trying to fix it myself, because I feel like I don't have a choice. But I also know I'm capable if I have to. It'll take me longer than somebody who knows what they're doing. May even cost me more. It's hard to say. Most of the time I think I'm saving money. And my preference would be to hire somebody to do it right, but if nobody's available, I'm not going to sit and wait. I'm not that personality. But if my neighbor calls and says their AC is down, I'm not going to offer to fix it, because it's not my job and I don't want to take on that liability. I'd like to see more of that attitude on the internet, when people so freely advise others on how to fix their computers when there's no liability. But, you know, all I can do is give you guys my experience and let you weigh that, the value of that information. And I hope that you give the same weight consideration to people that use screen names. You don't know who they are, you don't know their history, they're not verifiable. And when they tell you something with such conviction that this is the way it is, that just because they talk with confidence or because they talk a good game, that if they're not verifiable and they don't hold any accountability or liability to anybody, I hope for your sake that you're considering that before you choose to embrace what they're offering. And at the same time, if you're not paying me or anybody else, you need to keep that in mind too. Because when a customer is paying for a service, there's a liability that gets involved immediately with the law. And I've got to be committed to seeing that through, even if it means refunding customers money or paying somebody else to do it at my cost, because I am legally committed, you know, to that task that I've agreed to. Online, it's just the Wild West. Anybody does whatever they want. And people with the best of intentions have generated a lot of revenue for me because their intentions caused somebody problems that made it worse, that they had to call me out after giving up trying to fix it themselves. And they got so exhausted and tired of it, wasting all the time and money and effort and making the problem worse, they finally gave in and called me. I got paid. So I guess I should be encouraging it. It's good for business, but I'm not driven that way. I'd rather you guys really thought about the source of your information. And when it's coming from an anonymous name on the internet that's not verifiable, that should be about the value of the information as well, in my opinion. One Two says, love your channel. Thank you for what you're doing. I've been following you for years, and your tech info has helped me a lot, not only as a tech, but as a better decision maker. Right on. Thank you. Trying to teach critical thinking. That's what I'm trying to do here. I'm not trying to get you to agree with me. I'm trying to get you to come to your own conclusion that's right for you. Carey, it's like when electricians do data cabling and we test it with a fluke. Fluke is a meter, electric meter. 80% of the lines fail the test. And that's from Boingsy Batty. Yeah, I've seen some pretty horrendous wiring jobs. Sometimes electricians, they think they can do phones and network. Sometimes. Almost all the time. And they're not all good at it. If you chase two rabbits, you lose them both. That's funny. I like that expression. Yeah, so there's just the philosophy of it, right? Is it's your money and it's your time, and it's ultimately about your experience. And setting, what I'm doing here is trying to get you to set the right expectation, realistic expectations, when weighing the source of the information that you're using to consider. And just nothing replaces experience. There's no video that replaces experience. There's no book you're going to read that replaces experience. At some point, you're going to have your own experience. The old expression, you don't know if you like it if you've not tried it. Doesn't matter how many people tell you it's good or it's bad. Until you taste it, you just don't know the answer to that. And that's sort of the way it is in life with everything, you know. Especially when it comes to education. Experience trounces any level of education because that's the ultimate. We can read books all day long about how to build a building, but until we build one and it stands the test of time, how do you know if what you learned is accurate? Because other books say the same thing. If the building falls down, I'd suggest the books are wrong, or you misunderstood what you read. Granddad47's contributed £5. He says, keep up the good work. Well, thank you, Granddad. I appreciate that very much. All right, guys, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for today. It is almost dinner time for the dogs, who are not around right now. But thanks you guys so much for watching. Hopefully I can get this thing wrapped up tonight and get it shipped off to the customer very soon here. Because I think all I've got to do is get the cable management taken care of, which won't take too long. Put the Elgato HD60 Pro and driver in and test it, make sure it's okay. Probably put it right down there. And then button it back up. It's good to go. So it took a little longer than I thought. And I'm not going to change anything on the hard drive, the solid state drive, because I'm just going to advise the customer, I recommend you take some of these games off of here and then reinstall them onto the 2 terabyte drive. We'll leave the 2 terabyte drive installed, and I'm going to leave all the data on it. So I'll advise him to reformat that when he's ready and to move those applications when he's ready. And I think he'll be good to go. Because he's not near me, because I have to ship this to another state, I would sit with him. I would invite him and say, hey, let's go through this together and I'll help you with it. But given the circumstances, I think he'd rather have the machine back sooner rather than later. And that's stuff he can handle on his own. So that will be the plan. And then hopefully I could start a new build tomorrow, which I know Madi is very much looking forward to. I am very much looking forward to it as well. Working on trying to get somebody to work a camera for me, which I have not got figured out just yet. So for all my friends in blue, thank you so much for joining me. Those of you who are not blue yet, I hope to turn you blue one day very soon. Thank you to Granddad47, Madi Yoel, real name, Christoph Esch, Winston Anglu, James Bovey, Chester Hughes, Ryan Farmer, Your Music Sucks is the username, John Stellick, Donnie Seeger, Thomas Ian Costello, John Craig, Lourdes Evans, Revertive Cloud, Alan Maybrier, John Peck, Orly Doss. Thank you guys so much for supporting the channel, for contributing to today's live stream. I will see you all again tomorrow. And until then, where's my button? There it is. Until then, bye for now.